Third question is, how does a lettuce reproduce?
I don't know. It's a plant, so
It doesn't have any seeds. Have you ever seen a lettuce with a seed or a flower? It's a thinky question. These two islands, they have a total population of between a lot and almost too many penguins. They have been hit.
I'm going to dispute that. There's no such thing as too many penguins.
I said almost.
Okay, fair.
I mean, this is not my study. These measurements are not mine. I'm just a messenger. We can start the third block, which is where we start playing the demo, not the full game. I'm not that privileged. I'm privileged to have Jagriff, but not that much. Can you see what's here?
Yeah, I see some cotton candy.
Maybe now is the moment to talk about this.
At one point, I did have a first-person, like April Fool's mode, where you could have a camera on the penguin that you have selected, and you can play it from a first-person perspective.
Hey, that
of course,
would
it's just a joke.
Cool.
It's just a joke game.
No,
It's so hard to solve puzzles.
No. That would be cool.
I'm insane. Like, I want to make music for this game. I have no experience. Let me do dynamic music. That's what I decided on. So each item was going to have its own tune.
Well, one has to be ambitious to get to places. Let me tell you something. You cannot put in the same sentence, I play the piano and I don't know music. You cannot put those two things on the same sentence.
I see Noru's answer already.
Actually, Noru was my first guest. I'll work. You can't answer. You are not the guest. Hello everyone, this is Mael Duin. I play puzzle video games and similar, sometimes with the people who make them. And as I said last week, this is a special stream, and now you can see why. I have with me today Jagriff, the developer of Gentoo Rescue. How are you?
Hello, yeah, I'm good. It's been a stressful, I guess 2 years, but really the last few weeks. And this week is just starting to ramp up. So yeah, very excited, but very good.
Gentoo Rescue releases in 2 days. That's the correct way to put it, because for you it releases on the 22nd, but for me, because I'm in Australia, it releases on the 23rd. So we can do 2 things. Say it releases in 2 days, or the other thing we can do is wishlist Gentoo Rescue on Steam right now, so there's no confusion, because Steam will tell you this game is planned for release in about blah blah blah, 1 day, 23 hours, even it tells you the hours. So we are going to play a little bit Gentoo Rescue at the demo later, and if what you see is to your liking, you can go on Steam and wishlist the game. Even if it's released, it's a good idea to wishlist the game, because it also tells you if it goes on sale or if there's an announcement, an update. It's all goodness. So I think we are ready to go. So let me, Jagriff, explain very quickly to the audience what this stream consists on. It's divided into 4 parts. First part is series of quick questions, rapid answer. I always say the same. They are like more or less like yes or no answer, but you can do with them whatever you want. That's the first part, very rapid. It's like a profile check to rapidly know about you, like where do you fall on, I don't know, on the social scale, I don't know. Second part, it's pre-game, and it's all about you, your experience, about you as a developer. We want to know your background. And the third part is where we'll be playing the demo, and we'll be talking about everything about the game: design, art, music, absolutely everything. If I leave something behind, people in the chat can tell me and ask about this or ask about that. Actually, in the fourth part, I'll be asking all those chat questions. If we are talking about a topic and someone asks something, probably ask at the moment, because it's fitting where that question makes more sense. If it doesn't, I'll ask everyone's question at the end. At the end is the fourth part. We'll be talking about a little bit more general, zooming out from the game, talking about the environment in which the game is released, and there will be time for the special question. And I think that's it for everyone to know where we are at in the interview. Without further to say, let's start with this. Sometimes I call it profile check, and today I call it ice break block, because it's about penguins, so it has to be. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so which was your first ever video game?
Oh, Probably Mario, not 64, like the Super Nintendo Mario. Like I don't remember the title. I was so young. I was probably like 4 or 5 years old.
My second question was how old were you? But you are so fast. 4 or 5. Okay. And the third question, you'll see that they come in blocks of 3. The third question is a little bit dubious. Third question is, how does a lettuce reproduce?
What does a lettuce reproduce?
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's a plant, so it grows.
It doesn't have any seeds. Have you ever seen a lettuce with a seed or a flower? I've never seen it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. Actually.
It's a thinky question. Spoiler, it does have a flower. If you let the lettuce grow for longer, it grows a flower. And I couldn't believe it when I learned it. I had to check it, but it does. Next question. Favorite video game soundtrack?
Hollow Knight's the first one that came to mind. It's supposed to be rapid questions. But I want to change that answer.
I don't want to stress you.
I don't know if I want to. I mean, I that's the main one that comes to mind. I'll be honest. I play a lot of games on mute, or not. Like I play a lot of games with the sound on mute because I play a lot of competitive games, and so I'm like the super competitive nerd that turn anything non-essential all the way down. For single player games, though, of course, it's not as big of a factor. I think Hollow Knight's probably my favorite.
Name a developer that you admire.
Well, there's too many. Himpuli is the first one that comes to mind. Developer of Baba Is You.
Anime, dubbed or subbed?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Anime, Japanese animation.
Oh, I
dubbed or
neither.
subbed?
I don't watch. If I did watch anime, because I do watch. Like I've seen non-English television shows. I prefer subtitles, unless it's actually like usually the voice acting in English is very poor. So subtitles.
Always original and then subtitle. I'm the same. Tell me a hobby of yours.
Outside of games, baseball is a pretty big one throughout my life.
Which is the GOTY so far this year, other than Gentoo Rescue?
I mean, I have to say Blueprints, right?
You don't have to. I haven't played it.
That's the one that it took me by surprise. This isn't a game that's built for me at all. Like I don't like the sort of detective type games where you have to look around for clues and observe the environment, and there's puzzles that aren't like clearly puzzles, and there's a lot of non-self-contained elements to it. But I still played it and I liked it, so it's probably up there for me. There's other games I'm looking forward to, but they're not out yet, so it's hard for me to give them an edge over the one I've played.
This wasn't planned. Can you say any that you are looking forward?
There is one by Blukerstein, and I know him from the Puzzle Gamer Discord. Dittori, I think, is the name. I don't even know if it has a Steam page yet. I think he's planning on releasing that this year, and I played some playtest of that last year, and it was quite good.
Otori, you said?
When I played Dittori, like Ditto, Ditori, or maybe there's 2 T's. I don't know.
Okay.
It's a game about working with a clone of yourself.
Next question is third on this blog. If you look on the live stream, you'll see an image I'm going to show you now. You might feel familiar with it. Okay, so
I can see it. Yes.
Okay, so I need to ask, and if I had to ask one question, it might not be what you think I'm going to ask, but I need to know: does it taste like cotton candy?
Does it taste? I would say that's probably a good guess. I think, yeah, it's definitely very sweet, way too much sugar. The texture as well, like it just melts and just gets all over the place. Yeah, I think that fits very well.
I knew it. I I needed to double check. Last 3. Favorite puzzle video game?
Baba Is You.
And non-puzzle video game?
I'm gonna say Diabolical, which is a game that probably no one has heard of. It's a competitive first-person shooter inspired by Quake Live that came out like 5 years ago. If I was going to follow that up with a game that people have heard of, it would be StarCraft 2. And
very last question for this blog, I need to put you on situation. So, do you know about Heard and McDonald Islands?
I heard of them recently because of a world event.
You might know where I'm coming from. So, these 2 islands in the middle of nowhere, they are called Heard Island and McDonald Island. They have a total population of 0 humans, and this is an estimate, rounded up, between a lot and almost too many penguins. That's the population of this island. They have been
I'm
hit.
going to dispute that. I'm sorry. There's no such thing as too many penguins.
I said almost.
Okay, fair.
I mean, this is not my study. These measurements are not mine. I'm just a messenger. They are between a lot and almost too many. These islands, they have been hit with a 10% tariff from the US government. My question for you is, do you think that all those poor penguins would feel supported if we all wishlisted Gentoo Rescue in mass right now?
Yeah, of course. The penguins want you to, not just in the herd in McDonald Islands, but also in Antarctica, parts of Australia, like all over the world. Penguins want you to wish list Gentoo Rescue.
Of course. So this, I think you did very well. You were quick in answering. So this is the first part. I think with this, audience can have a little bit of a picture of you and your likes. If you allow me, we would move on to the second part, which is about you. Now talking seriously about you as a developer. Are you a solo dev?
Yes.
You don't work with someone?
No, I hired an artist to do the capsule art on Steam. But apart from that, everything has been me. Yeah, unfortunately.
So my follow-up question is, did you make everything for Gentoo Rescue?
There are some things. So some of the sounds, I would say most of the in-game sound effects are from freesound.org. I found just sounds that didn't have a license associated with them. I ended up tweaking a lot of those myself to fit a little better. And then apart from the sounds would be the only assets I've downloaded are the bind prompts, like press A to do something, press B to do something, or whatever.
Question is more like you collaborated with someone.
Oh,
we all get resources from somewhere, but did you work alone or hired someone or outsourced something to someone?
Oh no. All the design stuff has been me. All the good stuff, all the bad stuff, it's all me.
And is it your only job? Like, is it a side job? Is it a hobby?
I would like to say it's a side job, but I don't think it's going to pay well enough for that. It's definitely a hobby. I have a career as a software developer.
Well, you never know until it goes on sale. Like, it's actually available.
True.
Tell that to Croteam, the developers of Serious Sam, when they did Serious Sam, and then they did Talos Principle. You never know. You might be the new Croteam. What led you to become a game developer?
I could talk about this for a while, and there's a lot of factors that led into it. The big one, I guess, was at the time I was playing a lot of like esports competitions in Diabolical and another game called Limnus Gate. And then at the same time, I was also competing in another game, Multiverses, that might have heard of. Actually, that one was big for a little bit, and kind of all those games died around the same time. These are just hobbies, so it's not like I was making any real money. I was making like $1,000 a year, maybe, or $2,000 a year. But that was like a big amount of time I put into all these games, and it was a lot of fun. But it sucked to see them all end, and I just felt like having a hobby that would give me some final product that I could build up and build skills along the way, and just carry that forward would be great. I've always been interested in games. I've always sort of wanted to make games, but never to the point where I actually jumped in head first and started downloaded an engine and started trying. But those factors with those games just kind of all dying around the same time.
Sorry to interrupt you. What year are we talking about when this happened?
So this was about 2.5 years ago, roughly. So end of 2022 was when I think I downloaded Unreal Engine, which is what I'm using for this simple puzzle game. I downloaded that like October or November of 2022, and that's when I started. And I did it with the intention of making this game. I mean, maybe not exactly this game, but I had a sliding puzzly game with inspirations from like Baba Is You in mind at the time.
Where you come from is not from a course or a degree. Is everything self-taught?
Well, I have degrees in math and computer science, and I work as a programmer. So like the technical side, I mean, I don't know the details necessarily, but I can usually pick those up quickly. Programming I already knew, but just knowing general programming and then knowing how to dive into an engine and build off of that. A lot of things were self-taught, even programming things were self-taught at that stage. And then, of course, the art, music, game design, like all of these things have been self-taught and sort of iteratively with the game itself.
Game development is one of those jobs where you have to wear a lot of hats. There are a few of those jobs. Developer is one of them. Is what I also am understanding is that Gentoo Rescue Den is your first game.
Yep. First game, I made a tic-tac-toe app in 2012 for Android. If you don't count that, then yeah, this is my first game.
I would. It's experience is experience. What motivated you the most to make Gentoo Rescue? It's you were doing software programming, and then you suddenly thought, "Hey, I want to make a game." So what's this intention? You wanted to. It's I think it's a little bit hard for me to explain this question, so I always say these examples. Maybe you wanted to prove yourself that you could make it, or you came across Baba Is You and you thought, you know what, I would do it differently. Maybe not better, but I do it. I want to make this game, but I want to make it myself. Like I would do this and that. What motivated you to develop Gentoo Rescue?
Yeah. So the first thing. Well, again, there's a lot of factors. One is that I wanted to learn game development, and I wanted to pick a first project that was reasonable for a first-time project. Now, 2.5 year, very long puzzle game with 300 plus puzzles is probably not that. Scope creep has, sort of come on and ballooned this project just to insanity. But yeah, at the time I was like, oh, I'm going to start with a simple puzzle game. How hard could that be, right? And then I chose puzzle specifically because that's the main genre of a single player game that I like. There's some other single player games I like Hollow Knight and Terraria, these big Metroidvanias or open world RPG type games. Those are things that are outside the scope of sort of what I would consider a good first project. Also, they have things in them Hollow Knight has a lot of lore and story and stuff that I personally am not so interested in. So I try to stay away from those. So yeah, basically between on one side you have competitive multiplayer games, which are obviously out, and then you have these single player these giant RPG or Metroidvania games that's also out. So yeah, what remains is the puzzle game. I played Baba Is You in 2020. So it was very beginning of 2020. So basically 3 years before I started this one, and that maybe fall in love with the puzzle genre. Before then I had played Portal and I liked it, but it was never oh, this I'm a puzzle gamer now. But Baba Is You kind of did that for me. And then there was also a board game I played a lot in college. This was 2016, 2017, called Ricochet Robots, which is kind of the basis of Gentoo Rescue. So in Ricochet Robots, you're controlling several different pieces called robots, and you basically have to have them work together to get one to a certain tile, and it's using sliding movement. And so I had the idea of, I had this game I really like, Ricochet Robots, and I have this other game I really like, Baba Is You, that introduces a bunch of elements that you have to make deductions around, and you can change how certain things behave. And so the game kind of started out as the idea of, oh, what if I take Ricochet Robots, but then I add all these power-ups, and the pieces will now behave differently, and then you can maybe have puzzles where you move the power-ups between them, and the power-ups can interact in certain ways. And yeah, anyway, so this just led me down the road to Gentoo Rescue.
So it was more like an exploration, hey, let's see if this works, let's try to this and that.
It's not just that I wanted to learn game development, I also wanted to learn puzzle design specifically, as some of my aspirations to make maybe bigger projects, maybe an FPS or something like that, or a strategic type game. Puzzle design, I think, is a very good skill and something that I wanted to learn and hone. And so making a puzzle game allowed me to do that. And I think if future projects that'll come up. They always say, don't make a puzzle game, make a game in a genre that's more popular, but then sneak in the puzzles. And you can't really do that unless you have a good background in puzzle design.
You want to make puzzle games, but you need to know that there are many types of puzzle games. So within the genre, you can also pick a a specific kind of, like, I've seen other developers and other people working in development of puzzle games talking about how to develop, and the tools that they show, they don't work for every type of puzzle. So it's very interesting. Developing and learning how to make a puzzle game, it's not one path. You can take many different paths. You started the development like 2 years and a half ago, Seth? That's how long it has taken to develop Gentoo Rescue. That will be, I think, the most interesting questions to know your background, where you come from. I think that these questions are important for people who want to get into the field of development and game development. And it's interesting that you and everyone that I invite, they explain their background and the path they took, because it's unique for everyone, and everyone that wanting to jump in, they can see themselves reflected, like, oh, I can do this, or I haven't studied, but I can do it, or if I want to do it, how long would it take me, or some examples. So I think they are very interesting. Thank you so much. We can start the third block, which is where we start playing the demo, not the full game. I'm not that privileged. I'm privileged to have Jagriff, but not that much. So let me start it. You are one of those that you post your updates and your development, which I really appreciate, that you talk about your game without being finished. Like, it's not a finished product. It's so valuable that you do that. And at the same time, you are exposing yourself, because you are showing something that is not finished. It's more prone to critic, which at the same time is valuable to you, because you hope people will give you feedback. I appreciate that. This perspective, I would say it's recent that you have this in 3D. I played the mid 2024 demo, and then I played for the second time early 2025 demo. For a start, while I still I take my first steps, but I'm sliding, so I'm not walking, so I'm not taking steps. But anyway, you know what I mean. You said that it's a game inspired by Baba Is You. Any other game that inspired you, or if not, what parts of Baba Is You were the most inspiring?
Yeah, so initially it was just Baba Is You and Ricochet Robots, which is a board game, but I would still consider that to be the main two inspirations. But yeah, after development, I started, I played a handful of other puzzle games. I've been hanging out in puzzle discords and seeing other games that are discussed and what people like about some games, what people don't. And I usually try to view everything through the lens of, could I do something in my game that, can I add something to my game that makes it better? Could I tweak something that makes it better? And so in the process of that, there's been a lot of other inspirations. Probably the most obvious one is Patrick's Parabox, just with the whole world system of going in and out of puzzles. And I'm slight spoiler, it's in the trailer, but recursion comes up later on. So yeah, Patrick's Parabox would be one. The visuals themselves, these have been tweaked. I mean, as you know, you played a version from a year ago where the game didn't even look like this at all. A lot of visual inspirations have been taken from A Monstrous Expedition. Joseph Mansfield with Thinky Games actually gave me some pointers on the visuals. So yeah, huge shout out to him for reaching out and saying like, hey, your game's kind of ugly, you should do this. I mean, in the nicest way possible. He asked permission first and everything like that, which couldn't be more grateful. And yeah, I analyzed small bits of A Monstrous Expedition. Of course, that game's just beautiful. My game comes nowhere close to that visually, but it at least let it make some leaps forward in the visual quality from what it was before. Other things. So then, yeah, the puzzle design itself, I went through phases. Started out, I didn't really have any idea what I was doing. As I started to sort of get more refined in my puzzle design, it was around the same time that I played Steven's Sausage Roll. And so, unfortunately, or fortunately, some of the puzzle design has some of the inspirations, I guess, or puzzle design philosophies have crept in from that. This was probably like February of last year So some of that puzzle design has also been walked back a bit. So it's hard to say exactly how much of the different influences are in the final product themselves. And then yeah, back to Baba Is You. Like I say this game is inspired by Baba Is You, and I can understandably see that players would be like, really? Like, this isn't. There's no words. You're not forming sentences and changing the rules of the game. At sort of like a meta level. The initial inspirations for Baba Is You is why the items are in the game. Just picking up items, having power-ups, and changing the way that individual penguins behave is in a way kind of similar to changing the behavior by forming sentences. Of course, maybe in a much less awesome way that Baba Is You does it. But then also some meta stuff that Baba Is You does later on, and also in some of the modded Baba Is You games. I haven't played the modded stuff, but I've watched some few streams, and funnily enough, I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing in Gentoo Rescue. So there's some similarities there.
Just a clarification. You don't mean that different color penguins, they have different way of there's no difference in mechanic how they work. They are the same, but because they can use tools and gear, they can act differently, but they are the same. It's not like the blue can fly and the yellow can dig or breaks walls.
Right. Yeah. It's like Baba Is You. Baba and Kiki are the same. It just depends on how you define the rules in that puzzle. And so same thing here. Blue penguin, yellow penguin, they're the same. They might have different target locations, and they might have different items. Or they might be able to pick up different items, or you might want to, make sure you get the right item to the right animal. So yeah, I mean, in hindsight, this isn't as close to Baba Is You as the main mechanic there is, again, just insanely awesome.
Inspiration can be anything. Can be, oh no, because the music of this game did this, I based my game around this, and then I expanded in a different way. And it's a different game, but what makes it unique? What makes Gentoo Rescue unique, different from similar games?
I think the biggest thing is the slide. I mean, well, the whole package I think is very unique because it kind of I Lord Victor, a puzzle curator with Puzzle Lovers on Steam. I was watching one of his early playthroughs. He played a little bit of the playtest, and he's like, "This game is like every popular puzzle game that came out in the last 3 years, and combines them all into one game." And so I think that's sort of the biggest thing about Gentoo Rescue is that it sort of has just a lot of elements in it. It's very maximalist in a way, but while keeping the individual puzzles very minimalist and simple looking, but not necessarily simple to solve. But apart from that, I would say the biggest thing is the sliding movement, which is kind of a weird thing to say because the sliding movement is like so overdone in puzzle games. Like if you just look on any app store on any mobile device, you'll see just so many sliding puzzle games. But I think my game, Gentoo Rescue, I think it does it in a very unique way that makes it good, because a lot of times sliding puzzle games, especially if you have just a single agent, they just end up being a maze, and it's just trial and error. You go off in this corner, oh, dead end. You go off in this corner, okay, dead end, right? And that's not the kind of game this is at all. This is a very a thinky game that kind of like plays a little bit like a Sokoban, where you make deductions. Plays a little bit like rule discovery, where you have all these elements and you have to figure out how they work together and how you can use it to solve the puzzle. And so I would say sliding is the thing that is the least unique about the game, but then the execution of the sliding is kind of, I think, what makes it the most unique. And on those terms, I would also like to shout out the only sliding game that came out by the Recurse developer, I think last month, which also does sliding, and I haven't played it yet, but based on what I've seen of it, it looks like it does sliding in a similar manner to this, where you have very deducible puzzles, very small puzzles, but still very difficult. and not necessarily just giant mazes.
This, can you see what's here?
Yeah, I see some cotton candy.
Maybe now is the moment to talk about this. I know. Let me say this. I don't know what it is. And also, I don't want to know what it is. I won't make you say what it is. Maybe there's some people who know. I don't know. But I don't want to know. I want to discover. And it seems to be something special. I'll leave it there. So, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what it is. What I did see, I've seen this, but I don't know what it does. What I did see in, if I'm not mistaken, in the 2024 demo was this kind of lasers, shooting lasers. But lucky for me, I don't remember what that did. So I need to rediscover again.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the shooting lasers you remember are still in the game. They're not in the demo, in this demo. And they are different than the cotton candy. So, yeah, you can look forward to 2 different discoveries once the game drops.
Now I'm here kind of trapped because if I move, I fall into the... So I need to reset?
Yeah, or undo is fine. And this
if I undo...
this is something I can talk about if you would like. This is a common point of friction in the early game. I've gotten a lot of comments of people that just find this so weird that you run into a dead-end puzzle and you're trapped. You have to undo on the world. And, you know, spoiler, this is supposed to teach that the world is no different than any other puzzle. That's specifically why that's there. It's also... I guess that's, yeah, in the full game there might be a difference, but yeah, there's different spots in the full game that teach this in case someone doesn't happen to go in that corner. But yeah, in the demo I think that's all there is. And yeah, I know it's it's something that is very unintuitive.
I wouldn't say
undoing.
it's wrong. It's something you don't encounter usually, because usually the map is not a level, but in this game the map is a level. I wouldn't say this is a problem. It's just I was wondering if by undoing, I was undoing my progress on the level that's at the end. That's my question. But if I press R and I see it's the swirl, colorful swirl is still there, it takes me 2 seconds to put that doubt away.
Yep.
Quick questions. There's no story, or there is a story, or like an excuse or something?
No, there's no story. Any story is in your head, which is fine. People can create their own lore.
I did mine.
That, but...
I did mine in the 2024 because I realized these little penguins, and I believe I read somewhere that you need to like kind of reunite the little penguins with the parent penguins, something like that. But it's an excuse. It's not like you don't see the progress throughout the game. Like, oh, now you are not saving them. Now they are going to school or whatever.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm not a story person. I play. I mentioned StarCraft 2 earlier. I've said this a couple times in the Discord and puzzle game Discords that I've played through all 3 of the StarCraft or all 4 of the StarCraft 2 campaigns, and I skipped cutscene every single time. I just give me the gameplay. In this case, just give me the puzzles. So I don't feel like since you know, the story type things, lore isn't a big interest of mine. I didn't feel sort of well equipped to create something that would be good. And in my mind, something bad, it's better to have nothing at all than something bad. So yeah, you're rescuing penguins you're rescuing baby penguins by getting the big penguins there. And then the walruses, they want to be free, so they go into the water. That's the extent of it.
And which engine is the game made on?
Unreal Engine 5.
Unreal Engine 5. Ah.
Yeah. So I mentioned I started in 2022. That was around when, you know, there were a bunch of these showcases. Unreal Engine 5 was just releasing, you know, it was maybe in beta for a little bit. And, you know, it's not the best fit. I'll admit that right up front. The game would probably be... some things would have been probably a lot better if I had chosen, you know, Unity or Godot. or even just raylib and just you program it up. But part of the reason for Unreal Engine 5, I guess the first part of the reason is I didn't think it through that much. I just wanted to develop games, and I still think that's the best way to go about it. If anyone is looking to get into game development, don't second guess yourself too much. Just download an engine, any engine, just start playing around. You can always change it later. So first reason I didn't think it through, and then the second reason is I maybe did think it through a little bit, and I would like to make a 3D games in the future. Maybe FPS games or strategy games. With puzzle elements. Of course that'll be a big focus. Maybe a 3D puzzle game. Things like this. I sort of had in the back of my mind. So getting used to the 3D workflow, using Blender, creating 3D models, learning a 3D engine like Unreal Engine was something that I was interested in. And then I guess a third reason that's kind of silly is I'm not really looking to get into game development professionally. But if I ever did, Unreal Engine is a good tool to have in your tool belt. If you start applying for jobs, it's highly sought after.
So I'll go back, and then from here to go back.
If you hit escape, or if you're on a controller, start, and you can do exit current puzzle.
Because it tells you here which that there are layers, and there are some things I'm leaving behind. Oh, so if I'm here and I go up, I can't because I'm trapped. I need to undo. And then
yes,
we go
that's another that's another big point of friction that has been brought up many times, and I am stubborn about.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. I don't understand
the idea that once you land on a puzzle, you aren't allowed to leave it. It's just very unintuitive. It's very unnatural that, oh, I moved left and landed on a puzzle. I want to go back to where I came from. I should be able to move right. And that's true, I guess, in a lot of situations. Like this situation here, there's no reason I should disallow you from going back to ground rules. But just in general, with sliding movement, if you move right and then you move left, you're not always going to end up where you started. So if I didn't lock your movement on a puzzle, there would have to be some other solution to basically force a certain progression in the game, or to prevent things. And this is the one that I found, or I still find, to be the most elegant and to be the most, like, I guess, systemic, where you have this system of locks in your game and you build your puzzles. It takes a lot of very careful design of the world puzzles themselves, and like, where do you place the levels? Because wherever you place a level, if that tile has to be landed on, then now that's a required puzzle. And then if that tile doesn't have to be landed on, that's an optional puzzle, and that's only communicated to the puzzle design itself. So yeah, it makes things very difficult on the puzzle designers side of things. And in some ways, it makes it harder to communicate to players, what's required, what's optional, and also maybe a little annoying for players of like, why can't I go back? But yeah, it's just a choice that I still stand by. But you could always undo. Just hit the undo button, and getting players used to hitting the undo button, that could never be bad in a game like this, because I had one player tell me that undo is kind of a meta action, because it's not like something you do to solve a puzzle, but maybe it is sometimes something you do to solve a puzzle. And so that's.
I've seen games develop, or the main mechanic is the undo. Undoing is the mechanic. Very interesting.
Yeah, trace undos is one that I know. Yeah.
Few things from this point. Sometimes it happens to me that I find something in a game and I tell the developers, hey, this doesn't seem to work, this is wrong, I don't like it. And then they explain why they did it, and then suddenly I think, oh, actually it makes sense. Now I want you to keep it. Now first impression is, why am I locked? If I come from up, why can't I go back and go up? But now I see that you are kind of like locking as you said, locking the progression. I need to solve this puzzle before I can access this one. This is a map, but just because there aren't walls in between the levels, it's like if I was playing a Super Mario World, I cannot go to level 7 if I haven't finished level 1. So
Yep.
now
Yep.
it makes
the
sense.
purpose.
And also I see that this appears when you insist. There's this UI or indication that you need to press undo. What's this? The swirl, the white swirl on the lock? It's because I've been
Yeah.
inside.
Because you've seen it. That's communicated a little better in the full. I don't think it's communicated really at all in this game. It's the if you hit escape, I don't remember the default keybind. If you want to hit escape and look on the right, you will see a list of keybinds, and so there is a keybind for warp or map. I think it's called warp. And so when there's not a keybind for mouse, you can create one if you have the settings and do all the stuff. But since you're using keyboard, if you hit a keyboard key, you can see the keybind for warp.
G. So within.
G. So then, if you hit G when you're in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and again, this is stuff that's not really taught in the demo. If you hit G when you're in the world, you can then warp to whichever puzzle you want to go to. So any puzzle you've seen before. And so that's demonstrated by either, having the puzzle be solved with no lock, or if the lock's still there, by having the spiral on the lock.
And now if I go back, so I'll tell you this and maybe you can take it from where I leave it. You're placing, in this case, like I'm going to talk about this puzzle, and this other puzzle. So the one I'm covering with my head on the image, and the two subsequent. Restart. So this is the initial point. So you are placing, maybe this ties with how you develop the levels. You're placing the penguin near to the ending point, like the exit or reuniting the penguins. They are very close. So you are making, I'm guessing, you are making the player think that they need to go towards the circle. So you go towards the circle as the shortest path, but you are failing. Okay, so that's not the solution. You need to do something else. The first idea that I had is not correct. So I need to find another idea. So you're creating a process within me. Now I need to look somewhere else and start exploring. Let me show you the next one. Something similar. I felt something similar. Like the red one is next to the red penguin, so it should be very easy. But now we are controlling two. So I put this one, but this one now doesn't fall within. But if I bring this one, it's on top. So the solution is immediate to my eyes, but not to my brain. I need what I see is not the solution. I need my brain to catch up with my eyes and come to the solution, like find it. I see the ending, but my brain hasn't made all the. It's like when you solve a maze, a maze, you can see the entry and the exit. You immediately see both, but your brain has to go through all the path. And this other one, I think it was.
Yeah, so there's a lot of small details in both of those puzzles you just showed.
It's like
just small decisions that the player is forced to make, and if they make the wrong decision, they fail the puzzle in a way that's obviously failed, so that they know that they have to undo and reevaluate.
Bringing the yellow is very easy. Bringing the blue is very easy, but each one blocked the other one. So it seems easy. It's what I like of puzzle games, is easy to understand but hard to master. I'm starting to see this here. Is this somehow how you come up with ideas and develop the levels? What's your process?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Now, that's not the idea usually. The puzzles usually start from an idea, and so the three puzzles you just covered, each one does have an idea. The first one, the landing, where you just have a single penguin. That was the idea. Yeah, teach the player that they slide over targets, so they slide over their goal tiles, and so then once you have that base idea, then you have to develop the details and actually create the puzzle. And that's where these small decisions come into play. It's like, okay, I want the player to learn that they will slide over the target, So how can I do that? Well, let's just put them really close to the target and let them slide over it and fall into the water. And then that's the best way to learn, right? But, it also gives the player sort of a hook, or it gives the player some initial idea of like what to do. Because the worst case scenario is you give them a puzzle, they open the puzzle and they're like, I don't know what to do, and then they're not going to do anything. But if you put the target right next to the penguin, then they're going to be like, oh, this is easy. I'm going to go up, oh, I fell in the water, right? So just getting the player to start interacting with the puzzle and realize that fail state, it does both of those things well. You know, lets them learn, lets them interact, and then of course, then it's just a maze after that. They can go around and they can realize, oh, I need the wall to stop on the target. So yeah, that's this puzzle. The next one is, the idea there is like, oh, I want an easy puzzle that teaches players about multiple animals, and specifically about like the controls of like how do you switch between the animals. Because you could imagine I could have a puzzle here that has two animals, but you only ever have to control one of them, which, you know, I could have added, but I didn't want to add too many puzzles in the beginning of the game. I don't think the game gets super interesting until items start getting involved. So I'm secretly kind of trying to speed players through the beginning part where there's no items. So that's why I didn't have that intermediate puzzle. So I wanted a puzzle where there's two animals and the player has to switch control. And so then, you know, once I had that idea, how do you execute it? In this case, again, I put the red penguin right next to its target so that the player is going to try moving red. Now, this is a lesson they just learned in the previous puzzle, but it's always nice to reinforce lessons. So, you know, some players are going to immediately just try to move left and fall into the water, which is, you know, that's fine. That's going to happen. And a key point here is kind of subtle, that the red penguin is in the top row, and the way the game works, and initially when you load a puzzle, it'll select the penguins in a certain order, and so in this case it's going to select red first. So I know the player is going to come into this puzzle with red selected, and so I didn't want red to have to make any moves, and red can't make any moves without falling into the water. So the first action the player actually has to do here is switch the selection. So this puzzle is teaching that's one of the main lessons of this puzzle, is that you can switch the control of the penguin. So this is teaching players they can hit tab or Q to change to the blue penguin. But then it's still a little tricky, right? Because even once you realize you have to switch to the blue penguin and you move the blue penguin, the players at this point might not know how the penguins interact when they hit each other, so that's something they can experiment with. But yeah, if you move blue up, and then some players are going to immediately switch back to red and try moving, and they'll see how the penguins interact, but that's not going to get them to a solution. I don't think it's a super hard puzzle, but it's definitely probably harder than players would expect this early into the game.
I think there's only one solution, like only one way.
Oh yeah.
It's like you need to go through, it's not like 20 possibilities.
Oh yeah, that's
once I figure out usually. I need to switch to the blue can only go up, can only go right, can only go down, can only go left, can only go up, and then the solution comes, it's apparent. Now I change again, and then, so you can only do one move at a time. Well,
there are other moves. So the fact that there's two agents here, you can select blue and move blue up. And yeah, the only other move with blue that makes sense is moving blue right. But players just learn about swapping selection, so a lot of players are going to swap back to red and think, oh, I'm done with blue. So yeah, you have to keep this action in the back. Like swapping penguins is an action, right? And so this is why there's no wall. So like I could have put a wall to the right of red's starting position, and that would allow them to, after moving blue up, red could move left and then could move back right to back where it started. But I didn't want to do that. This is supposed to be an easy puzzle, so I wanted to restrict the state space as much as possible. So it's like super, super highly unique. If you move left with red and you're not on the target, the puzzle's lost because you can't move back right without falling into the water. And so this is also like a very intentional design decision to have this puzzle be, highly, highly unique. If you don't do the exact move sequence, then you're going to run into not just an impossible situation, but an impossible situation that is very easy for players to understand. Because the worst case scenario is you're you put the player in an impossible situation, but they're not sure. They don't recognize that. So that's why there's a lot of missing walls here. So that if you make a wrong move, you're in the water and you have to undo or reset.
So a bit more like in general, not specific cases of levels. To come up with ideas for levels, you visualize the player doing something or putting them in a certain situation with intention, like I've given you this item, now I want you to play with it. Look at what you can do. I'll put you in this situation to realize you can do thing 1, thing 2, thing 3. Is this how you see how you come up with the levels, how you develop them? And then I want the player to be in this situation. Now, to be in this situation, how would everything else look like?
Yeah, it's it starts with an idea. Like you have an idea, it's like, oh, I want to show off this cool interaction I have, or I want to show off this neat trick I can do with this item, or something like that. And so once you sort of commit to making a puzzle with that idea, then setting it up is where all the the devil's in the details. That's where all the work goes into. And generally, this isn't always possible, but whenever possible, you want to make it where the very first move communicates to the player like what they have to do, and then after they make that first obvious 1 or 2 moves, they run into a problem, and then they immediately know what the problem is. So they know they see the puzzle and it looks easy at first. They make a couple moves and they realize, oh, okay, I see why this is going to be hard.
Like this one.
And then they can start working towards a solution. Yes, like this one.
It's
so that the first move I always try to bait. I mean, it's not always possible. So like some puzzles aren't going to do this, but I try to bait a first move just to make the player start interacting with the puzzle and realize immediately, oh, okay, I can't do this. It's not as easy as I thought.
I think I remember. Because this puzzle in particular is very interesting because I found myself something clicked on my brain, because you are used to move towards where you want to go, but this level showed me that you need to sometimes do the opposite, and it's what it does. So you start here, you go up, and you are back to the beginning. But from this point, the way the penguin advances is by pressing the opposite key to where you want to go. You go left, but the penguin moves right. You press down, and because it bounces back, goes up, and left, but goes right.
Yeah, so this puzzle, I think this is the first. I don't want to like just grade puzzles good, bad, whatever. This is what I would consider like the first good puzzle. Like all the puzzles before it, I don't think are bad puzzles. They do what they need to do, but this is the first puzzle that kind of has a really unique, like, oh, I can do this, right? Like this is the one that sort of shows something very special. The other puzzles are just teaching you how to move the animals around, and even though they have unique ideas in them, and you have to make good revelations, the thing that they're showing off isn't so cool. But in this one it is. And a fun fact about this mechanic, actually, the spring was, I think, the first item or the second item I made. And I mean, this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I didn't even consider this. Like, I made the spring, I put it in the game, I programmed it, and then it wasn't until later that I started playing around with the spring and I was like, oh, you can bounce backwards off of walls that you're right next to. I did not even consider that. And it's funny because that's what the spring's for, and like that's the entire like mechanic of the spring. This is this emergent consequence. I wouldn't even call it an emergent consequence. It's introduced in puzzle 2. But yeah, for me it was actually.
That was puzzle. That was puzzle 2. Yeah, this one.
For the spring, yeah.
For the spring, yeah. I like the first ground. How's it called? Ground
rules.
Ground rules, because it's a tutorial and covered. It's a tutorial, but you don't feel like it's a tutorial. You feel like you are playing, not like you are being taught or you are studying or focusing on learning, which is best.
Yeah, it's hard to do, but that's kind of what The entire game is. I see people on game developer subreddits or discords or so forth. Game developers always complain about making tutorials because it's hard to make a fun tutorial. Unfortunately, I'm making a puzzle game where the entire game is a tutorial, so this is something I've had to learn and iterate on a lot to get it to work. Where you're constantly trying to teach the player things. You're constantly trying to plant some seeds in their head about how something works, and sometimes you subvert that a little bit, and sometimes you expand on it later. And yeah, it's it's a very very difficult game design challenge. But when it works, it's marvelous.
And another aspect of the game that's kind of unique, a level within a level inside a level, that idea. This game has that. And we can see here, like, we are inside another level. This level, maybe you can explain, or I'm sure you can explain better than me, but this is what I understand. This is a level, but this level has levels, and at the same time, this level in specifically is called progression. Within progression, we can find other levels like retrograde, skipping, and this one we are now unbounded. If we go in, we are in this new level, which is called unbounded. Here at the top it shows. Not sure the logs why they are there, and at the same time what would be now our map, which is a level, it's within another level which is called teaser, right? If we go back, we can go back to teaser. So this is teaser, and then we get in, and then we get in. This is how you move in this game. Okay,
Yep. It's a typical world system, except usually it's just one world, and then there's levels in the world, and maybe you would have multiple worlds that you can travel between in different ways. It's just that with another layer stacked on top of it, and in the full game, maybe another layer on top of that, and maybe another layer on top of that, right? So it's a giant tree of puzzles and puzzles and puzzles. And then, by the way, the lock on the level names, that's just saying that you haven't beaten that particular level yet. So it's a way to communicate that, oh, I'm in this at level unbounded. I haven't beaten it yet. Although now you just beat it. So the lock went away.
Because there's a difference between I have seen it and I have solved it. So if I go, no, I don't. If I go in twist, now I've seen it. That's why it has a swirl. Because I know, because I played not the first one, but the second demo earlier this year. There's an importance on you've been in, but you haven't solved it. And this might ties with the mechanic of backtracking. Backtracking and going back is important in this game. If we go, we don't go to the beginning. Sorry. If we go to the map, we can see here there's a lock. There's a level that is inaccessible, apparently. Here, right at the beginning, it's like, if this is the beginning, why can't access it? So it's at the same time you are not doing anything. I'm not capable of seeing what it is, what's inside. I cannot do anything with it, but at the same time I'm learning that I have to leave it. I have to let go, and maybe I discover later that I can come back and how I can come back.
Yeah, that's the purpose with this level. In the full game, there's maybe more than one in the first section. But yeah, the locks that are inaccessible, they're partly there to teach players that they don't have to clear all the locks. They just have to beat the current level. There's a couple other locks here that you didn't have to clear, but you did. And I expect most players will. But I wanted to leave one there just so the players, some players aren't going to notice this, so it's not like it's not a necessary tutorial at this moment. But for some players, they'll notice, oh, there's a lock there that I haven't beaten. I guess I don't have to clear the locks in order to beat my level that I'm in. And then, yeah, the other big reason it's there is to make players want to get there and then realize they can't, and then realize, oh, I must be able to do something later. I've advertised this game as a Metroidvania in different places. So it's important for me to, kind of show off that there's some element of backtracking early on.
Because there's some backtracking. Does that mean that there's optional content?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of optional content. Even without backtracking, the puzzle, like the worlds themselves, are going to contain a ton of optional levels. Like those ground rules. I mean, this is the demo, so it's hard for me to put too much optional content in the demo. Ground rules here contained 2 optional levels, not counting the one that you have to backtrack to. And in the full game, like a world might have 14, 15 puzzles total. Maybe like 4 or 5 will be required. And those puzzles are usually a little bit easier. They maybe teach more essential things that players really need to know before they advance. And then everything else is optional. The one I guess I would say kind of it's partially a good thing, partially a bad thing about the game is that the game doesn't communicate what is optional outside of the puzzle design itself. This is something I've kind of gone back and forth on whether I should say if I have an optional puzzle, I should color the lock like red or something. It's a challenge level. It's going to be off to the side and color it red. I've opted to just not do that, just to keep it very like systemic. Part of the game itself. Players, if they want to figure out if a puzzle is optional, they just have to figure out if they really need to land on that tile. And I try to place a lot of puzzles that are obviously optional because in order to reach them, you have to go off this beaten path into this little nook. And so, yeah, clearly you don't have to do that. But then there are other puzzles that seem like they might be required because they're sort of on the main path, but there's another way around. And so it's allowed me to keep sort of my options open on not having to, rubber stamp this puzzle's optional, this puzzle's required, this puzzle's a challenge puzzle. It's just, I've had to think about this and I've had to design the worlds around it, but I haven't like explicitly communicated these things to the players. And so that's again, it's something that some players aren't going to like. I think other players might like. I like having this sort of more elegant system associated with it, but it does introduce some friction.
On the side that maybe I'm understanding better now and I'm more used to because I've experienced, but my first impression was it gave me a little bit of anxiety. So I was on the I don't like it group because maybe I'm used to puzzle games level after level, but this is different, which I also at the same time appreciate now. I'm thinking where to go without looking like a Metroid game or similar where you have to backtrack. It doesn't look like it. It looks like a puzzle game. Why? It was confusing, but maybe because it's too new, which is also normal. And I felt it was confusing, like the way. Now I'm totally fine. I'm okay. Like, yeah, I see this. So what? I know I can, or maybe I don't know how, but I understand. It looks very unreachable. By the means I have so far, I won't get to it. Or maybe I can, but I haven't discovered. And later on, the light bulb goes on, and I discover, oh, I could have done this 2 hours ago.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's unreachable puzzles are there. Yeah, it's it's again teasing those two things. It's teasing that you can come back later and solve it. Then it's also teaching that some players are going to just beat their head against the wall. They're going to say, "Oh, there's this puzzle here. How can I get to it?" They're going to spend. I watch people play the demo. The demo doesn't do this as well as the full game. It was kind of designed very quickly, but I watch people beat their head against the wall in the demo for like 10 plus minutes trying to figure out how they get to this level when it was actually impossible. So that's that kind of breaks my heart because that's not that's a really bad situation to have in a puzzle, is to not communicate when something is impossible. And so I try to keep things more obviously impossible when I can, although you can't cater to everyone. So this is a game for what I've been calling puzzle sickos. This is a sort of a harder puzzle game, despite the looks. And so yeah, I've opted to keep some of that friction in the game. I'm sorry if it causes anyone too much anxiety. I think players will get over it. I mean, if they enjoy the game and they keep playing the game, they're going to get over it very quickly. They're going to get used to the way the meta structure is and internalize these things. But yeah, at the beginning, I can see how it is a little daunting.
But I am okay now. Like, I understand. And in regards of this, how do you feel with players missing out on content? How do you feel with designing a puzzle that you think like maybe it's very interesting, but they miss out because it's optional, because it's, maybe you can explain better. Maybe you separate them like this is very interesting, but it's on the leaning towards the hardest type of puzzle, so I make it optional.
Yeah, there's a lot of considerations there. So there's puzzles that are just too difficult and they can't be on the main path, and so I have to stick them off to the side, even if I think they're really interesting and maybe they teach something important. Actually, in the case when they teach something important, usually I have to just make the puzzle easier because I need that on the main path. But if they teach something cool or show off something cool, and but there happen to be difficult puzzles, then unfortunately, yeah, sometimes I have to put them off the beaten path, and it does suck that players are going to miss out on that. But at the same time, I kind of want players to miss out on that. Like I don't. Some people are going to go through and try to beat every puzzle. I mean, that's the way that's the way I play puzzle games, and so I expect a lot of puzzle players are going to do that. But I don't think that's going to be the best way for everyone to play this game. People that are newer to puzzle games or have difficulty visualizing the movement system and things like that. At the beginning of the game, that's not something that I want to sort of recommend for everyone to do, and that's another reason I've sort of tried to teach that there are optional puzzles that you don't have to beat everything. Um, but from a game design standpoint, I'm kind of just leaving that up to the player. Like I'm treating the player as an adult. They can do, they can manage their own fun. Part of that is also like the hint system and the journal system. Some players are going to use that a lot. Some players are never going to look at it, and that's perfectly fine. That's something that again, I'm letting the player sort of decide how much assistance they want, how much direction. If they reach a really hard puzzle, some players are going to just beat their head against the wall. Some players are going to think, I'm going to come back to this later, and some players still will like, I want to look up hints, right? And so I kind of want to try to cater to all three of those audiences by just letting the player choose what's best, which, in hindsight, that might not be the best game design philosophy, but it's just sort of my philosophy. I used to actually teach in college, so that was something that I kind of did in the teaching as well. I kind of, let the players, the students, be responsible for certain things, and not trying to spoon fed and letting everyone do everything, because sometimes that's not possible. And so this is just from the standpoint of like optional puzzles that are on the main path. But then there's the same consideration about mechanics or entire mechanics as well. Like there's a lot of really cool mechanics in this game that I'm excited about that don't appear until like 15 hours in, 20 hours in, or something like that, right? And it's tough because I would like to front load some of these things because I know a lot of players aren't going to get through that much of the game. And so it's a trade-off there of like, do I put the mechanics sooner than it really should be just to show it off? Or do I put it in sort of its more proper place, when the player is more well equipped to receive it? And so I've kind of opted to do what I think is best for the game, even if that means that some players are never going to see it. So yeah, there's a lot of late game stuff that that I would really like to show off sooner than I do. But just the nature of puzzle games, especially harder puzzle games that happen to be long, is that you just have to accept that not everyone's going to do everything, and just try to make the best experience you can for what they will experience.
Do you have a number of puzzles? Like there's 100, 150, and more or less on a normal playthrough, you have the whole game. You've had people play normally without finding everything. How long would it take to complete the game?
I wish I had better answers to this. Like I've done a fair amount of playtesting, but like I've been like, it's not like I had the game here, playtest it, and then I watched them play the whole game. Like I was constantly like doing daily updates, so it's hard for me to really gauge exact numbers. I've been saying that the game is like 30 plus hours long, but that includes a lot of optional content, and it really depends on how they play the game. Because, like I said, a world could have 15 puzzles, 4 or 5 of them are required, and sometimes even entire worlds are optional. There's several entirely optional worlds in the game, and so if you just do the required content, which again isn't really communicated explicitly, so this is something that you'd have to kind of solve a puzzle in your head to realize, oh, I don't need to do this puzzle, right? So it's not something that I expect players to do. But if you only did the required content, then there would be about I want to say probably like 60 to 100 puzzles. It's probably less than that. Yeah, probably around 60 puzzles that are like absolutely required, and if you do all those, to reach an ending. Actually, just to reach an ending would be smaller. Just to reach like the first ending of the game
is to have a sense of length, not to know specifically.
No, this is an interesting question. Like I said, I really wish I had better answers. If I did it over again, I would do playtesting differently. I would have sort of the game complete, let players play test it, and then just not touch the game for 2 or 3 weeks, take in all the feedback, and then go back and do another iteration. I was just like on the ball, like I was doing daily updates, like, oh, there's an issue here. Like, okay, I'm gonna fix it before another playtester finds it, because I don't want multiple feedbacks on the same thing. If it was something that I agreed was an issue, but then it's kind of made it hard to track these things as I removed puzzles and I've shuffled things around. But yeah, it's just the calculation kind of finished. It's around 40 puzzles if you just do the required content to reach the first ending, which is missing a very large chunk of the game, and not just the puzzles you skipped, but also puzzles you haven't gotten to yet. And then as far as time wise, I mean, again, the number of puzzles varies a lot, but so does the time that it takes for someone to solve a puzzle. I would say probably like 5 to 10 hours if you just really speed through and only do the exact like optional stuff and only care about getting the first ending. But that can balloon very quickly as you start doing more puzzles, as you start getting stuck on harder puzzles, as you start doing optional worlds and discovering some other things in the game. Then yeah, it can go up to 15, 20 hours, 30 hours, and beyond. Like I have some playtesters that have played for 50 plus hours.
That will be me. I'm very stubborn. When I get to a puzzle, like for example this one, it's like, what am I missing? There's something, and then I rethink. And this level would make me rethink, but I think in this specific case, this one can't be solved now, I believe. So it's the first one that you encounter. I appreciate that it's very clear. Some of the solutions, and maybe I'm spoiling the demo because I remember some of the how to solve them. But I appreciate that it's quite clear that no, you don't have any tools, so it's not a problem of you have the tool but you don't know how to use it. You don't have anything.
This is a big design goal just in general in puzzle games, is if the player is at an impossible state, they better know it, right? If they're in an impossible state and they don't know that they're in an impossible state, then you've made a mistake as a designer. And so that includes puzzles that are actually impossible. So like this one. And this is a big issue with puzzle Metroidvanias. So I saw a lot of commentary around Isles of Sea and Sky. They've done updates since then. I haven't played the game, so I can't really speak to this too much. But I know I saw a lot of complaints that you would come upon a puzzle, but then not know if it was solvable, if you had like the right power-ups or whatever. Then in an action-based game, it's usually a little bit more clear. But in a puzzle game, every time you open a puzzle, you're not sure how to solve it, right? So it's hard to know if it's because you're lacking some ideas or if you're actually literally lacking an important power up or something. And so being a puzzle Metroidvania, I was very aware of this issue and did what I could to resolve it. I always have the backup plan of having in-game hints, and the first hint on these sorts of puzzles will always say, "Oh, this is impossible." But I didn't want to rely on that because I know some players are never going to look at hints. And so, yeah, whenever I have a completely impossible puzzle, it will be as simple as possible to make it clear to the player that, oh, you need something. And then I expect that at that point the puzzle is more about realizing you need something and then realizing what you need than the puzzle itself. Being uncertain just in general, this isn't just a sort of Metroidvania type puzzle issue. It's just a general puzzle issue. If you're on a puzzle and you're stuck, not having any ideas is not as fun as having ideas to try. And so an ideal puzzle is going to be hard because you have to challenge the player and keep them interested in showing off unique things. But you also don't want it to be so impossibly obtuse that they literally don't make any moves. You want to sort of encourage interaction with the puzzle. And then, when you have these puzzles, these, sort of Metroidvania type puzzles where they're impossible unless you do the right thing beforehand and set certain things up, then it's you kind of throw the player into that situation you want to avoid, where it's they are stuck and they don't know that they're stuck, and they have no ideas because there isn't any idea for them to know based on what they're currently looking at. So yeah, it's a big design issue that I've been aware of and tried to design around.
Would it be better to lean onto the obvious side in this particular issue? Maybe. I remember never happened, or I don't remember like so obviously as with Animal Well happening to me in a Metroid game, or for example, remembering Guacamele. It's like obvious. There's the yellow door, so you need the yellow power, but it's too obvious. Would that be better for designing, design point of view, or would there be a better solution?
Well, I don't know if you want to make. Well, so I haven't played Animal either. I haven't played any games in the last 2 years because I've been working on this game. But it's hard for me to say exactly that situation. But for this puzzle game, I want to make it clear that they need something. They need something else. They need to do something else somewhere. And I want to communicate what that is, but that sort of what that is part is going to be less obvious by design. That's kind of the puzzle, actually. It's like, oh, I have this puzzle. I can't solve it. I know I can't solve it. Like, that's very clear. I can't solve it right now. I need something. And then what do I need is kind of the puzzle. And so that's something that, I try to communicate in the design and give hints towards, but I don't make it super, super obvious what you need. In all puzzles, of course, the early ones when this comes up, it should be more obvious. Like in the Inconceivable, you've been playing around with a spring all game, and here you have a puzzle you really wish you had a spring in. And so, yeah, you learn about this. But, in other instances of this in the full game, it's still going to be clear that you need something, but it's not going to be clear what you need or how, and these sorts of things, because that's sort of the puzzle.
And now, very kindly, is asking me, do you want to start with nothing or with the spring? And now it's...
Yes. Yeah, that pop-up, I really don't like it the first time it's discovered. And it's very important to have as a quality of life thing, because as the game gets a lot bigger, like, not the demo, and as you start doing this in a lot of places, I want to respect the player's time as much as possible. I mentioned blueprints earlier. That does not respect my time. I want to basically make it where if the player does something once, then they have it. They don't have to redo it. And so that's what that pop-up was basically telling you, is like, you've landed on this puzzle before without a spring, and now you've landed on it with a spring. How do you want to proceed? You can do either one, since you've done either one before. I don't want to force the player to have to, if they want to go back and see the spring variant of that puzzle, they don't have to go back and collect the spring and land on the puzzle, since that might be kind of hard. That might itself be a puzzle. And so that menu there is just kind of storing, when these things happen, it's stored, and that menu is giving you an option to pick. And I've opted to keep that even on the first revelation, which I really don't like, but it's sort of the most natural way to do it. Because once the player learns about bringing items into puzzles, kind of sucks that they learn about it through this menu, because you usually don't want to have a menu teach something. But I think it's kind of inevitable if I want to have the menu behave nicely and be consistent.
If I have a screen with text or symbols, or I don't know if you are referring to this screen in particular, but I like that it's very self-explanatory. I was about to ask you, actually, without bringing up this screen, what's the name of this one? Progression. So in progression, there are more levels within. I was about to ask you, so now how do I know if I am missing other levels that they were unreachable before, but now I can access them with the spring without having to retrace everything and go back to every single level and recheck? Is there a level within a level in here? But actually, this is the answer to my question. I can see I've completed Nuts, Propulsion, Inconceivable, and Fling within, what's the name of this one? Teaser. Within Teaser. And I'm missing one in progression, within progression, and one within ground rules, I think. This wasn't in the 2024, because in
No. It was, but somewhere else. It was much more awkward, but yes.
not like this at least, because this would have get rid of my anxiety in one swing. I remember looking at, I think there were like layers, and it was very confused. I was very confused. This is very different. I can see the progress. I'm going to ask you about like art in general. Maybe you want to separate, or maybe you want to talk about together art and music. How do you come up with this aesthetic for the art? What was the process?
Sure. So it started actually. So the version you played of the game, I'm trying to remember the very early version of the game actually didn't have penguins at all or walruses or anything. It was actually called Slycursion, and you controlled shapes. It was very abstract. And so yeah, once I started adding penguins to the game, then I had this ice world naturally, and that's the world you start in. And the game felt kind of bland at that point because like everything was ice. Everything looked the same. No matter which world you were in, it all looked the same. And that's not good because the world system is kind of confusing. So I need at least some visual, differentiation. And so I started adding different biomes. Like I have, this desert or beach. This is a beach. This beach biome, and then I have, in the full game, there's like 16 total. Some of them are kind of similar, but like a volcanic or hell biome. I have a desert. These like forest. I call it a forest biome. There's no trees. It's just green. It's green is forest to me, and just lots of different colors just to make things distinct. And then as far as the process goes, it's just been very iterative. If you look at the game from January or even January of this year, it looked a lot different. There was a lot more. Specifically, there was a lot like the normal map on the water specifically was a lot rougher, and there was a lot more detail in the background and stuff. And I mentioned earlier that Joe from Thinking Games reached out and was like, "This game's ugly. You should improve it in the nicest way possible." And so yeah, he gave me some tips, and working with a Monsters Expedition as a reference, was able to basically make a much softer looking game with these nice bright gradients on the water. I mean, yeah, the art process has been very iterative, tweaking, and of course, always trying to make it where things are easy to parse, because you don't want the visuals to get in the way of the puzzles. So I've been very careful to make sure that there's nothing busy going on in the center of the screen. Like if you open up the puzzle, you see puzzle, and then you see a background essentially. Since you want to focus on the puzzle, and at this point, I guess I'm rambling.
Why is it 3D?
So this started from just when I started developing. I used Unreal Engine. If you use Unreal Engine, you kind of have to do 3D. I mean, I guess technically you can do some 2D stuff, but that just stems from my choice of engine, which again was because I want to eventually make more sophisticated 3D games. So I wanted to learn the workflow. I don't have any art skills. It's like I don't think I'm going to become someone that draws custom assets or does pixel art or anything like that. 3D modeling is something that I can do though, and so like the workflow itself felt a bit easier to me. And then yeah, it's just progressed just from that. At one point, I did have a first person like April Fool's mode, where you could have a camera on the penguin that you have selected, and you can play it from a first person perspective.
Hey,
Of course, it's
that
just a
would be
joke.
cool.
It's just a joke game.
No,
It's
no,
so
no,
it's
no,
so
no,
hard to
no,
solve
no,
puzzles.
no. That would be cool. You finish the game, you unlock a FPS, a first person camera option, and then you can get dizzy, do that to yourself. So
Yeah, dizziness definitely comes with the sliding movement.
the decision of making it 3D it's not an intention. Like I decided for this reason. It was more like, what can I do? So this is on my reach. Making it 2D is not on my possibilities. It's not on my table. Can I do it 3D? Yes, I'll do it 3D. It's more like that's the process.
Well, I wouldn't say it's what I can do as much as what I wanted to learn, because I didn't know Blender. I didn't know how to make a 3D game any better than I knew how to make a 2D game. But I thought learning how to 3D model would be something that I would like more than learning how to draw assets.
I thought you said, or you meant that you already knew a 3D modeling.
No, it's something that, I mean, I maybe had a little bit of experience, but nowhere to the level of what I have now after developing the game. And it's just a workflow that I thought I would be more interested in.
And what about the music and sound? Now I might put the volume a little bit higher. Now there's no music. Let me go back.
Unfortunately, you're showing off the music in the demo. I think is all placeholder. There might be one track that's not placeholder. I'm rewriting all the music, or I've rewritten most of it, and there's still maybe another one or two tracks I want to get in before release. It's music is really hard for me, especially since I have these like different biomes. Like I have a beach biome, so I want to make music that's kind of background music, kind of ambient-ish music that you can kind of relax to and doesn't get in the way of the solving puzzles. But at the same time, I want the song to somewhat represent the environment you're in. So I'm gonna need to make a beach theme. And I have very little music background. Like I can play very basic things on the piano. I'm self-taught on the piano, and I play it sometimes to relax. But like I don't I don't really know music theory at all. I had not had any experience with making music before Gentoo Rescue. I downloaded. I purchased. Spent my biggest budget expense on this game has actually been buying FL Studio to create music, and yeah, it's been hard to just compose songs that sort of fit the environment. Mainly because my only musical skill, if I'll even call it that, is on the piano, where you're just playing a single instrument. And so it's hard for me to create music that uses several multiple layers of instruments and coming in at different times, and does so in a relaxing way that also fits the environment. Like just all these considerations. And also I'm like super picky. Like I love Baba Is You music. When I played it, I had no complaints about the music. I enjoyed the music. I can still remember some melodies. But if I created something like Baba Is You, like my own critical thoughts in my head would be like, this is going to get annoying after 5 minutes. I can't do it. I can't put it in the game. Of course, I couldn't create anything nearly as good as what's in Baba Is You. But like anything that's sort of fast paced, or anything that has a sort of rhythmic beat and very memorable melodies, I've kind of cut away from that and just tried to keep it very just relaxing background music.
These songs you talk about, the beach, and they are not in the demo.
No, unfortunately. I did post a preview of the beach music on Blue Sky about a week or two ago. That's pretty much the only preview you would have. It's there is one track in the demo that's still in the game right now, and I don't intend on changing it. But it's not this one that you're hearing. The music actually in the demo, this is all music that was created before penguins were even in the game. Even though the beach one kind of sounds beachy, it actually kind of works. The music in the demo is all based on the item. I'm insane. Like I want to make music for this game. I have no experience. Let me do dynamic music. That's what I decided on. So each item was going to have its own tune.
Well, one has to be ambitious to get to places.
Yeah, it didn't work out so well. Like I have a track that plays whenever a puzzle has a spring, and then a track that plays whenever a puzzle has a hammer. And then I was like, oh, if a puzzle that has both, it's going to play both tracks at the same time, except they don't really mesh together at all. There are desyncs that happen sometimes, and all these sort of issues came up. So I've just completely abandoned that idea, and I'm just doing one track per biome, which is a much cleaner way to do it, much simpler way to do it, at least from a music making standpoint, I think. Although it does require more music overall, the music itself sort of has a clear goal, and you don't have to worry about different things meshing together. At least that's out of your control, since you're able to just write the track that you need. But yeah, it is more music work. You have to create more tracks, and you have this consideration.
Now let me tell you something. You cannot put in the same sentence, I play the piano and I don't know music. You cannot put those two things on the same sentence. I think I'm a little bit like you. Like I'll talk about me instead of saying we, because I'm not sure. I like to do everything myself, and at some point I break and I realize I cannot do everything I want, and I cannot do everything the way I want it, and I need to reconsider. Maybe not if, but in which situations would you consider outsourcing? Maybe not the music, but if the weakest you said, or I think for you is the art or design, or maybe in that case, under which circumstances or in which conditions, or maybe never, when would you think of working with someone?
I mean, I've actually considered it for this game. This game is basically zero budget. Like I have commissioned the capsule art on Steam, I bought FL Studio. I paid for putting the game on Steam, but apart from that, I haven't spent any money on the game. And part of that's because I'm super risk adverse, and it's a puzzle game. How well can it do, despite me thinking it's a great game and it has a lot of content, and I think players are really going to like it. There's still the thing in the back of my mind. It's a 2D grid-based puzzle game. Like, how good is it going to do? So yeah, basically risk aversion is a big factor that has made me stay solo. But then also the thing you said about wanting to do everything yourself. Like, one thing that I'm not confident in myself is being able to work to like instruct someone else what I want for something that I don't really know what I want, like the music. It's been really hard and challenging for me to create the music, not just because I don't have music skills, but also because it's hard for me to picture what I want, and I have to really just iterate on it to really understand what I want. And doing that with someone else, like, they make something that's pretty good. I don't know if I have the personality to be like, oh, this is great, but like, do this instead, right? Because I wouldn't really be able to communicate that very well. So that's a big challenge. But the biggest thing has been
That is
budget.
part of the challenge. Maybe you don't know what you want because you don't have a spectrum to choose from. And in regards of music, for example, you work with someone who is an expert. They can do two things. They can do the job for you, or they can maybe that's more like a consultant. They can unlock you. So they will talk to you and they will tell you, look, what's your initial ideas? What are you trying to achieve? And then you say, oh, something like beachy. And then they will come up with a suitcase full of songs for beach. And then, oh, I didn't know this. They, just by having a conversation, they would unlock your mind, and then they wouldn't do the job. You still do it, but they would help you and in reaching. It's about music, or it can be the art. But I can see these two situations where you can hire someone to do it by your instructions, or someone helping you reach what you really want to achieve.
I agree. I don't want to say that the reason I didn't hire anyone was because I didn't have confidence in myself to be able to really curate what they create. The biggest factor, far and away, is budget. I actually did talk to a couple of people for doing music. Patricia Taxon, I hope I'm saying her last name right. I've only seen it written. I haven't heard it pronounced. And also Gregory, who did the music for Taiji. I talked to both of them, and was kind of close to. I mean, they both offered to give me really attractive deals that really would have been underselling themselves, which again I didn't really feel comfortable, sort of underpaying people to do, to do these things for me, even though I kind of desperately needed it. But at the same time, it ultimately came down to a budget decision that just I can't really afford to put too much into this, especially as my first game, not really understanding, what the prospects would be afterwards, how well the game's going to do and these sorts of things. Not having a great, I guess, idea of the landscape of the market, and it's kind of been hard for me to make decisions. And it's also specifically with the music, but even this applies to the art and other aspects, is that like I like learning things, and I started off with this project to learn as much as I could. And there's no better way to learn something than to say, hey, you have to make 15 tracks in the next 2 months before your game comes out, right? And that's helped me learn music design, even music composition, even though it's not amazing. At least I can feel happy and feel proud that I've actually created something and developed these skills that could be useful later on.
Also, you don't have to hire or work with, don't really have to be with a monetary contract in between. Just by having testers, you are getting feedback, and they would tell you, and it wouldn't feel like they are working for you. They would tell you, oh, this works, this doesn't work, I like this, I would like this to be more like the other way. So that also another way to work with someone.
I look forward to working with a bunch of gamers on Thursday once they become they buy the game and they become playtesters, and when I leave a bunch of feedback. Of course, the game's going to be finished. I'm not intending on doing continuous development on it, but if I get a ton of feedback about this this song is terrible, like it's really annoying, or this song is really boring, or different type of things, then I would be open to changing some things, if it's like overwhelming feedback in a certain way. And so yeah, I know gamers are harsh. I'm a gamer, so they're brutal. So I look forward to that when the game comes out.
I actually have wanted to ask you in regards of Gentoo Rescue specifically, not after Gentoo Rescue, after the release, you are still working on the game.
Yep, there's a roadmap of things I want to do. The core game will be done. I don't intend on adding any puzzles or changing any puzzles. Of course, I will leave the option open for me to change things if there's a major design issue that gets found, or any bugs or anything like that. But that's not what I'm planning on working on. That the main thing that's missing on release is going to be the whole custom level system, and that's something that's not super important on release because players are going to need at least a week or two before they really start to get interested in making custom puzzles. So I have some time on that. And currently the game will release with a puzzle editor, so they'll be able to make puzzles. And it's just the puzzle sharing system would have to be kind of manual at this point, like sending text files around if you want to share the puzzles that you've made. I would like to integrate with Steam Workshop. I'm assuming that won't be too hard. I haven't really looked into it at all because, again, it's not a high priority right now, but that's something I'm going to look into after release. And then another big piece of that that's missing is being able to play other people's levels. Right now, you can only do that through the puzzle editor, which is a little awkward. Like someone sends you a puzzle, hey, check out this puzzle I made, and you have to open it in the puzzle editor and then run the test, hit test or whatever, and then you can play their puzzle. Not the best experience. So I would like to develop a system where once someone makes a puzzle, they can upload it to Steam Workshop. Someone else can download it to Steam Workshop so it already ends up in the correct place. And then in the game, they can, click, I want to play this custom puzzle. They play it, and it could, a puzzle could contain other puzzles, right? So a custom puzzle could contain 100 puzzles. Like the entire game is actually stored in one file that has one giant puzzle that contains, other puzzles, which contain other puzzles, and so on. And so I'd like players to be able to create basically what I've created here and be able to play that through, a menu and not having to go to the puzzle editor to do it. The functionality is kind of there right now, but the ease of use and just the polish around that is something that I plan to work on post-release.
One maybe you touched a little bit, like I'm not sure, balancing difficulty / puzzle noise.
Right. Okay. So puzzle noise, that's just a scary word to me. I want the puzzles to be as simple as possible. I want the players to understand what they have to do and then what the obstacle is. Of course, some puzzles, that's just inevitable that, you can't do that very cleanly or very elegantly. And so some puzzles do end up being maybe a little bit unfocused where the player isn't sure what they have to do. Like puzzles are going to be challenging, right? So they might know what they have to do, but not know how to do it. But some puzzles, they might not even know have to do, or they might not even know what they have to do. Those are hopefully very rare, but they probably will happen because, there's 300 puzzles in the game. And so not everyone is going to be sort of well suited for this very, clean design. So that's puzzle noise, I guess, is that, I tried to make puzzles that are as simple as possible, as clear as possible, but still providing challenge. And so this is a good example, hot potato. This is the hardest puzzle in the demo, in my opinion. And unfortunately,
in my opinion as well.
Usually when I have hard puzzles, I want the solution to actually be interesting. The solution is not so interesting, unfortunately. Part of the reason this puzzle's hard also is that it's introducing some new stuff that it's in the demo. The demo kind of just throws you in the deep end after you beat progression, after you beat the spring world. You got to learn a bunch of stuff. In the full game, I wouldn't consider this puzzle to be abnormally hard because it actually appears quite late when introducing some other mechanic. The mask mechanic is introduced quite late in the game. But this is a good example of a puzzle that very simple and it's pretty easy to understand. Although I guess in the demo, it's probably a little bit hard to understand the problem because in the demo at this point, you don't know how the bomb works. You don't know how the mask works. And so you're kind of trying to learn how 2 items work. And both items are kind of weird. They're unlike other items where usually an item has an effect when you move it. Like the cane has an effect, it only steps 1 tile forward, or the spring, when you move it, it bounces off of a wall. These 2 items, internally, I've been thinking of them as like defensive items. These items have an effect when they're hit by another animal. And so, yeah, in the demo, from the perspective of demo players, this is definitely a very hard and unintuitive puzzle. But it's still simple. Like there's not a lot going on. It's not very noisy. There's no red herrings where there's this element that you don't need to use, but it's sitting there teasing you the whole time. So I've always tried to avoid those. Simple but difficult is sort of my philosophy when it comes to puzzle design. But then variety is another philosophy, and so there are a couple of exceptions. Very rare. 300 plus puzzle game, 300 plus puzzles in the game. Probably like 5 of them I would consider to be kind of noisy, and those are very specifically there to just add variety. What was the first question? What was the first part of the question you asked about?
Before that,
puzzle difficulty.
If it's of any consolation to you, I understood that immediately with this puzzle. Like, I felt the game was taking me step by step, teaching me slowly. Suddenly, I come here, I don't understand these items, I haven't used them, even I use them and I don't know what they do. I understood this was an extra for the demo, if it's of relief to I understood immediately. The question was two-part balancing difficulty and puzzle noise.
Yeah, I've already mentioned puzzle noise. I try to avoid it when possible. Sometimes some of it's a little unavoidable if you want to introduce a special thing, and then it's a trade-off of like, is this thing cool enough that it's worth having this extra noise for it? And in some cases, that's happened because of some meta stuff, some Metroidvania stuff, some backtracking things, where unfortunately sometimes some extra noise gets added for a reason that's not immediately apparent, but it's apparent when the player comes back later. These sorts of things. I know there's an example in the demo actually. The progression world has that block that you have to use to reach resilience, I think. It's this one in space.
Yes.
That block is not used at all.
Yeah.
Or there's also an extra tile that's not used at all your first time through the puzzle, and it seems a little noisy. I saw players playing the demo, they were trying to use that before they really could, but they have to come back later and use it. And so that's an example of something that sometimes a little noise that I don't really like gets added for a future purpose, and then it's a trade-off of is it worth it? And when I feel it's worth it, I will take some noise if it makes the overall experience better. But it's hard to judge that because some players are never going to reach the second stage of that, and so yeah, it's always a difficult decision. But then as far as balancing difficulty, to me, this game is naturally difficult, so I've never really had to try to add difficulty, which is really nice because adding difficulty I think is a hard thing to do. For this game, it hasn't been hard at all. But in other puzzle games, I can imagine it being hard, and puzzle designers will be inclined to add complexity, which I don't like, right? That kind of gets to what you're talking about noisy puzzles. And so thankfully, I haven't had to do that. So thankfully, I've only had to remove difficulty when trying to balance things. And so for removing difficulty, usually it's there's a bunch of factors. I think the biggest one is deductions. So what I mean by that is make sure if you want a puzzle to be easier, make sure that the player can very clearly see what they have to do and very clearly be able to deduce, what their next step is, what their next step is, what their next step is. And you build this chain of deductions, and then you can judge how difficult a puzzle is based on, how long this chain is or how difficult each individual deduction is. Because sometimes you have a deduction, but it's very obscure and convoluted that you have to take, I have to put this penguin here. That's going to be required to put this other penguin here, which is going to be required to put this one penguin here, right? You have this sort of multi-level chain of deductions, and that makes the puzzle very difficult very quickly. And so for puzzles that are on the main path that teach something essential, that are required, I've tried to limit the number of deductions, and I've tried to hint at the deductions a lot more strongly to make it easier or make it more likely players will discover them. And then the other way to make puzzles easier, which is it's definitely tied into the deduction discussion, but it's also just reducing options. If you want to make a puzzle easier, just make it brute forceable, which isn't ideal. You don't want anyone to brute force your puzzles. If you're brute forcing your puzzles, then I failed. But make it where they don't end up in these long dead ends where, they make a wrong move. The puzzle's impossible now, but they don't know it. And maybe they could make an entire, tree, like the state graph is a very long, disgusting path that they can take once they're already at a dead end, but it's not clear. And that's where you end up having, players spend 5, 10 plus minutes trying to solve a puzzle that's not solvable. So I would say I always try to cut those even on puzzles that I want to be difficult, because those, while that does add difficulty, it doesn't add interesting difficulty and makes the game sort of more punishing in a way that's not fun. And so I've always tried to keep the state graphs very small. So like the options that a player can make are all fairly small. And when the player's at dead ends, I want to make sure that it's clear, or at least even if it's not 100% crystal clear to everybody that plays the game, I want to make it where it's something that the player is reasonably expected to discover. Is like if they spend a minute on the state and then they should be like, wait a minute, this is impossible. If I'm here, I can never do this, right? And so you want to have these situations, and that's one way to control or balance the difficulty.
I was going to ask, how do you know if a puzzle is difficult if you know the solution? It's not difficult to you, but you explain perfectly. You use tools to know. It's not related to knowing the solution. It's how to reach the solution.
It's still hard though. It's not an easy question. Like once you know the solution, it's just staring at you the whole time, and so it can still trip you up. I can have a puzzle that I think is pretty easy, and then players have a lot of trouble with it. And if that happens, that means that I didn't understand something about that puzzle. The hint system in the game has actually been really helpful.
Let's use it. I haven't used it.
I was going to say it's not even helpful for the players as much as it's helpful for me to write those hints.
Oh.
If I try to write hints for a puzzle, and my hints, like I always try to, I don't want to write instructions. So the way I'm doing hints is I'm trying to basically build that chain of deductions. So if I have a chain of sort of like 4 or 5 critical deductions that the player has to make, that's basically going to be 5 hints that kind of lead the player along that path. If I have a puzzle that's not, I wouldn't even say that's too difficult. I would say a puzzle that's not good, then usually that comes out when I try to write hints for it. If my hints, if I have trouble coming up with deductions that the player should make that are kind of obvious or something that I expect the player to know at that point in the game, then it usually means that the puzzle's not so good. And I've actually already scrapped, as I've been writing hints for the last couple months, I've definitely scrapped some puzzles or reworked some puzzles based on trying the right hints for them and failing. I don't want to have hints that are like, oh, move yellow left and then up, then move blue right? That's just giving a solution. I want the hints to sort of lead the player to the solution. And so if I'm not able to do that in a very clear and concise manner, then the puzzle, it still might be a good puzzle, but it's a smell. Like, the puzzle, it could be okay, but it smells bad, and I need to look into it some more and think about maybe if there's something I can do to improve it.
I remember using the system in the 2024 because I was a little bit lost, but didn't on the 2025. Also, in the defense of the 2024 version, it was like, here you have everything. Like a little bit of, it was a little bit too much. On the 2025, it's much similar like this. It was more contained, self-contained. It was more. It has a defined shape.
Yeah, the 2024 version. I'm not. I had several different demo versions. I've been updating the game like way too frequently, as I mentioned earlier. But pretty much every version from 2024 was too hard. It didn't tutorialize things very well. It kind of just threw players at the deep end. And some players really like that, but that's not the game that I necessarily want to make. There is elements of that post-game, end-game for those players, but the main path of the game is not that. So yeah, the new version of the demo kind of represents that better.
I've seen you updating quite a lot the way, like what you are just saying, like how to make it, which ties with my last point, my last question, which is accessibility. What can you tell me about accessibility? I've seen you redoing the menus and how the information is transmitted, because accessibility is not only for people with issues differentiating color. accessibility is for everyone, making the game not easier but easier to understand, which are different things. It's accessibility. What can you tell me about accessibility? What the biggest challenges or options for problems you are foreseeing players will encounter?
So for me, accessibility, I mean, I want the game to be accessible to everyone, obviously, no matter if you're this is a very color heavy game. So if you're colorblind, I have this, option where you can change the colors of the animals. That's probably the biggest accessibility feture I have.
Is it
Another big
on the
one,
demo?
yeah, you should be able to do it if you go to settings under gameplay. There should be. It's not it's not very intuitive. The settings menu, it is what it is. I think anyone that's sort of mature enough as far as games are concerned to go to the settings menu is mature enough to navigate this one. So it's just arbitrary sliders, and you can see how they will change the color of the animals. It's under gameplay settings.
I'm always curious because I don't use them, and how every game takes a different interpretation and a different solution because the challenges within the game they are different. The solution for one game most times cannot be translated to a different game. Color wheel?
Yeah, there's a lot of options here. That's why I added the little hint bar above, because it's none of it. Some of it's not clear at all, and a lot of it is for like just giving players customization. So color wheel will just show which color the certain animal is selected, and it's useful if they want to use a different selection method, which you can if you do gamepad direction select. If you're using controller, then you can on keyboard you can hit 1 2 3 4 to directly select a certain color. But controller only has the right stick for selection, and so by default, hitting up will select the penguin above where you are. And if a player is playing with controller and they want to hit up to select yellow, then they can do that with the settings. And so I've tried to add every setting, and I'm not trying to remove. Like if I added a setting that was useful at some point, and I think it's still useful and still valuable to someone, I'm still going to have it in the settings, even if it a lot of players are going to be confused by it. I really probably should separate some of those things off into like an advanced menu. But yeah, it's not a high priority for me really at the moment. And that's also why I've worked on different binds. So like having rebinding in the game and letting players fully customize their binds. A big motivation behind that is that I don't use QWERTY. I use a custom version of Colmac. And I have a non-standard keyboard. Let me see if I can actually. So very non-standard keyboard. This is one half of my keyboard. I can't show you the other half. It's basically this, but mirrored. So a split keyboard, it's like curved. It's completely non-standard format, and I'm not using QWERTY. So like anytime I play a game, I go directly to the settings, start editing binds. And so that's why I made a lot of intention to put a lot of care towards the custom controls. And that has a cascading effect. Like it really annoys me in games when I rebind like WASD for different keys, and then I go in the menus and I still have to use WASD in the menus because there's no option to rebind the menu movement. And so in this game, if you rebind your movement, it applies to the menu as well as in game, and that's kind of considerations like that have been taken throughout. And I guess that's part of accessibility. You asked about the biggest challenges with accessibility. For me, that has actually not been the colors. This was pretty easy to add. It's been the mouse support. So players can play this game entirely with their mouse, and this brought about some challenges and some big pitfalls that I unfortunately fell into. Because some people are only going to be able to play the game mouse only, and I wanted that to be an option. But then you have this thing where players could play keyboard only, or they could play mouse only, or they could play keyboard and mouse. How do I sort of communicate all three of these? And so the way I chose it, this was a big mistake I made, is that I chose, I'll just show the bind prompts for whichever their last device was, which of course that's how games work between keyboard and mouse versus controller. But between keyboard and mouse, that doesn't work so well, because if someone, let's say, clicks the play button, then the bind prompts they see are mouse, because that's what they last used. And so the bind prompts, they're going to see are only mouse, so they're going to assume they have to use mouse, when the majority of players playing this type of game are going to use keyboard. So that was a big pitfall. I saw some people confused. Matthew, the developer of Taiji, actually played the game, and he thought he had to use mouse only, and he was ready to like Alt F4 the game. And I was like, oh no, you can use keyboard. You just have to hit the keyboard key. But this is just a big design oversight that I didn't consider, and it was all because I wanted to support mouse only. So the way the game works now is that if you're using keyboard and mouse, it'll default to showing the keyboard bind prompts. If you want to use mouse only, you can go in the settings and make some appropriate changes. But so the game still technically supports it, but it doesn't sort of tutorialize it, because the act of tutorializing that you can play mouse only was confusing the people that wanted to use keyboard and mouse or just keyboard only. So that was a big one. And then just on the topic of accessibility, I know we were talking about the hints in the journal system. To me, when I hear accessibility, I think of more of like inability to interface with the game, like not being able to distinguish the penguins so I can change the colors, or not being able to use a keyboard or a controller so I need to play mouse only. That's a much bigger priority to me. The game doesn't, the game's a difficult game. It doesn't hold your hand. And so I didn't really add hints as necessarily a way to make it more accessible. I just added hints, I guess, as a way to make stubborn players that get stuck and just want to move on the ability to do that, which I guess you could say is accessibility. I don't know if there's really a difference there. It might just be splitting hairs. Custom colors and the mouse only has been the biggest undertakings as far as accessibility goes. The hint and journal systems are just, for me, quality of life issues or quality of life features, like especially the journal, where every time you learn something new, it gets put in the journal. Some players are never going to look there because they want to sort of have the game teach them everything, which the game attempts to do. But the journal is there to have a nice check up on that. If there's some detailed thing about it that they don't fully understand and they just want the answer, then it's there. If they quit playing the game and reload the game for the first time like 2 years later and they don't want to start back at the beginning, the journal's there for them to sort of relearn what they refamiliarize themselves with something that they learned before. And so yeah, for me, those are more quality of life things than accessibility.
The first way you describe the hint system is like I'm forgiving the enemy. It sounded to me, but I'm glad you clarified. I think I've asked you everything. I don't know. Am I missing something?
I don't know.
Anything else that you'd like, or you think you know better than me in the game? And something that you would like to comment on?
I don't really have any. I can't think of anything like specifically to the game that we didn't already discuss. We discussed puzzle design, which I think is the biggest thing about the game.
Design, I guess. Music, mechanics, art, accessibility, length, difficulty. No one can complain.
There is one thing. I think the game is, there's this like school of thought for puzzle games that a game should only have a hand, like one or two mechanics, and everything else should just be emergent. You want think of Steven's sausage roll is an example, although it does sort of introduce mechanics later on. But anyway, Steven's sausage roll is an example that people go to of like, oh, there's really only one mechanic, but then you just discover more and more about it that was hidden from you. But then you have games that are very maximalist, like Baba Is You. You have like so many words you have to learn, and they all have special interactions you have to learn, and all these sorts of things. I don't really have a preference between the two. I guess if I had to pick, I would say that I prefer maximalist games, because I just prefer more situations where there are like very conceptual things to discover and make deductions about. Whereas when you only have a couple mechanics, it tends to be more, there's still a ton of deductions, but it tends to be more spatial. So like if I made this game and I didn't add any mechanic, like no items, no meta stuff, and it was just only sliding, which there is a game only sliding, I think the game could still be a good game and you could still have good puzzles, but the puzzles would be very, the deductions would be entirely spatial. So some people would call it very fiddly. There wouldn't be, these clear, like logical steps to, or, realizations to make that aren't just given to you by the, the geometry or the structure of the levels. And so for me, I prefer the more maximalist games where you have a lot of both types of deductions. Not to say that you can't have, non-spatial deductions in games with a very few mechanics. You absolutely can. I think it's just comes up a lot more in more maximalist games like Baba Is You and like Gentoo Rescue. There's just a ton of mechanics. I would say probably too many mechanics in the game. And that's what I prefer. But while I call it a maximalist game, I still think the puzzles are minimalist, and that's something that I've strived to. We've already talked about this, but keeping things simple and easy to parse, and having the difficulty be very hidden. And then that's not to say that maximalist games also can't have emergent mechanics, which of course Baba does. Of course, this game does. It's just that not every mechanic is emergent. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of touched on this already, but that's just an additional thing I wanted to add. One downside of maximalist is that the games have to be really long to really realize all these different mechanics. And you still want emergent mechanics. Emergent mechanics are the best. So I'm not trying to, talk badly about emergent mechanics. Absolutely not. Emergent mechanics are the best mechanics to have. It's just that if you want more than that, the game has to sort of balloon in size. And that's the biggest downside, I think, of this game, Gentoo Rescue. It's just too long, which, I say it's a bad thing. Some players are going to really, love to sink their teeth into it and play through all of it. Although I realize that, a lot of players are going to play the first couple of worlds, be satisfied, and move on. And that's just the nature of the beast. And then I don't know if there is. I did have one other thing I was going to mention. I actually brought this here. So I mentioned Ricochet Robots was one of the inspirations. This is a board game that I played in grad school. I got really into it. It's a competitive game that has a lot of sliding mechanics. So it's basically competitive Gentoo Rescue, but without walruses, without items, just basic puzzles. And I was so into this game that I actually 3D printed my own version of it. So this is a Gentoo Rescue physical, circa, when did I make this? 2019, I think. So actually around the time I was playing Baba Is You, probably. So this is a quarter of the board. There's 4 pieces like this, and they all meet together to form one giant board. And these are the tiles, and then these are the targets, and then there's also these other pieces I 3D printed. I'm a math nerd, so these are all math things. There's a yellow Klein bottle. There's Klein bottle, and there's one of each color. Mobius strip, and a couple others. And so I have a Gentoo Rescue physical version, otherwise known as Ricochet Robots, from about
Very
6 years
limited
ago.
edition.
Yes.
But was this for a test or for fun?
No, just for fun. Oh, I mean, the game was $50, and I was a broke grad student, and I really liked the game. And I had just gotten a 3D printer. I know I just said I was a broke graduate student, and I just got a 3D printer. Kind of contradictory, but I was playing around with this thing, and I was like, I want to make a game of Ricochet Robots. I can do that, and it's even better than the actual board game, because the board game you can't move around the walls. In this, I can pick up these wall pieces, and they can slot into different spots. So it's just a hobby. I always have these different projects that I can work on, and so Gentoo Rescue has been the longest project I've worked on, but it wasn't the first one.
That level 3D printed is larger than what you are used to make. Just saying.
That's why I had to have four different pieces, so I could print only a quarter at a time, and all these considerations. And this is actually my first time using Blender as well. I learned 3D modeling. Of course, I'm just modeling rectangles essentially. The actual Klein bottle Mobius strip I downloaded, but the board itself I had to model, since no one else was insane enough to do this. But very simple. So that's sort of my modeling background before Gentoo Rescue.
That would be, as I said, everything that I can think of to ask you about Gentoo Rescue. So that would be the end of part 3, which always is the more important, the largest. So moving on to the 4th part, which is post-game and zooming out, more general questions. More general, but still related to the topic, of course. In general for the game, what would you say it was the hardest part to make, or maybe the art, or not the music? Maybe
it's hard because I want to say music because that's what I've been doing most recently, but if I was working on something else more recent, I would have said that. So I wouldn't say this is the hardest, because for me this was stuff that I enjoyed and was good at and already had knowledge about. But I actually like the most technical achievements that Gentoo Rescue had is I actually wrote a solver, which it's just using A star, which if you know what A star is, you realize that's not really that sophisticated. But the heuristic that you need for A-star, basically the description of like an estimate of how many moves it's going to take to solve the puzzle from a given state. Developing that was actually pretty difficult once you start incorporating all these mechanics. It doesn't function on meta mechanics and things like that. I never went back and added that into the solver. But that was quite a challenge. I wouldn't say it was the hardest for me, but I think from someone with no background in anything, that would probably be the hardest thing. And it's been very useful actually, because it's allowed me to create a puzzle generator, which, I mean, I'm going to stop you. I didn't use this to like make puzzles in the game. Those are all handmade. But the puzzle generator was something that I would run overnight, like every night on my computer, and generate like 100,000 puzzles. And then it would try to solve those puzzles. And if it noticed any inconsistency in the move logic, it would spit out, oh, I found an error on this puzzle. And then it would save the puzzle and give me the move sequence that would recreate the error. And I found so many bugs this way. It was like the best way to test the game, like, bug test the game. And I did this overnight testing for months. And I would rerun it again. And if I ever maybe I would consider the game, completely bug free. And then a few months later, I would do some small change to the mechanics. Then I'd have to go rerun this thing again, and I would find these bugs. That whole process, I think, was probably the most difficult, like objectively speaking. Again, my background was in programming, so for me, I think this was easier, or not the hardest thing, but it's been so valuable. And also, it's my interest, so I was like excited to work on it. So that's why I kind of went overboard on it. For me personally, the most challenging part, definitely the music and the visuals. The music's challenging because I'm really picky, and I can only make a certain style of music that doesn't really fit the game. And, there's a bunch of challenges like this. The art is challenging because I am really bad at judging art. Again, I come from, I play a lot of puzzle games, and that's sort of one of my main genres of games. But outside of puzzle games, I come from competitive games where I play games on low settings. I turn off every effect. Like, I play the ugliest looking games possible if it gets me extra frames. So coming from that background, like, I don't really care about visuals as much, as long as the game is clear. Like, I can see all the elements. I can understand the puzzle very quickly. And so it's been hard for me to iterate on that because, I was like, oh, that looks good. Okay, ship it, And then even if it's something that I knew wasn't really good, for me, it was sort of enough. And so it was really hard for me to self-evaluate and iterate on that process for the visuals. And again, I've already shouted him out twice, but yeah, Joe from Thinky Games was so super grateful. I'm super grateful to have him give me some feedback on that and kind of be my eyes, I guess, to improve the visuals.
We all are grateful to have him in the community. If you are complacent maybe, or happy with the level of something, I wouldn't say that's the biggest challenge, because okay, the art or the design, visual design or music, it's okay for now, or I'll leave it. I won't think much about it. It's not presenting a challenge to you. But on the contrary, if you go on another topic way too much in depth, and it's presenting problems that you want to, or you need to solve, those are the challenges. So I would take your first answer as the answer. Like, a challenge is something that it's a wall you need to break, not a wall that it's on your side and you're not thinking on crossing. I believe.
Well, in light of what you just said, let me amend my statement. The visuals weren't like, oh, that's good enough, let's ship it. It was more like, oh, that took a lot of work, and I don't think I can do better if I spend another 2 years on this. So let's just leave it. That's kind of the position it was. Like, okay. I knew that there were improvements to be done, but like literally I had no idea how to do it. And then Joe's like, hey, you should just, make this normal map a lot so that it's a little bit more soft and blurry in the background. And, he gave me like, more detailed instructions or like ideas to try. And then of course, once I had those ideas to try, I can start iterating on that and be like, oh, wow, this does look better, and then give me some ideas to move forward. But, we're kind of blocked and you're like, this isn't good enough, but like, I don't know if I can do better. And I don't know if it's worth me spending all this time on it.
Luckily, knowledge with the first game carries over to the second game. and on the third, on the fourth. I always ask this, what's the hardest of development? And you guys, you developers, are changing my mind, because I always, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe it's ignorance coming from outside of I'm not a developer, so I'm always expecting you to, every guest, to say marketing. What's the hardest part of development? Marketing. But you never say it applies to you and my previous guests. They never say marketing. So you must be all very good at marketing.
I made the game that I wanted to make. I made a game I wanted to play. So I didn't give any thought to like, am I making the right game? Am I making a game that's easy to market, easy to communicate to, future players? I'd say that's a big mistake, but it's a mistake that I think every developer makes with their first game. You just sort of dive face first into this idea of, I want to make this game. This is the game I'm making. And then once the game is mostly made, then you try to promote it, and it's hard to promote because you made a game for you. You didn't make a game for anyone else.
In my opinion, marketing is part of the development, and what you are doing on socials is the marketing. Even though it doesn't look like, but you are talking about the game and you are exposing the game, and people feel always entitled to comment on everything. They will get attached to your game because you directly or indirectly are presenting something. Maybe you are asking for second opinions, or you are not, but they give you their opinion as either way. And this way is a way to build up the interest, and that's, I think, I'm not an expert, but one of the correct ways to do it, to present and expose the game during the development, not when you press make build on the engine. At that moment, no, that's not the moment to do the marketing. It's way before. And also, this is all my opinion, of course. It comes from me. The marketing of the second game starts with the first game. So what you do today with Gentoo Rescue, it's going to carry over as well to the second game.
Yeah, so let me add a little bit to that, actually. So again, backing up to what you asked, you said, what's the hardest part about game development? For me, it's been the things I listed. It hasn't been marketing, because for me, marketing hasn't really been part of game development, because it was a mistake. I should, of course, I'm not going to make this mistake again. Ideally, you market your game idea before you even start game development, right? So you develop the game in a way that players are going to play it. You don't develop the game just for yourself and hope players would like it too. Of course, I've been promoting the game, and that has been challenging. And if you ask me what's the most challenging thing about making a game, or like selling a game, I would definitely say the marketing and promotion, and particularly my game, because this is just a big mistake that I have with Gentoo. Regret what I have with Gentoo Rescue is, like, this is a sliding puzzle game, and there are a ton of sliding puzzle games, and I don't want to disparage against anyone individually, but by and large, they're typically not that great. They're typically like maze-like games. They're sort of a more casual, mobile game type thing. And so when people see a sliding puzzle game, like hardcore puzzle people, when they see a sliding puzzle game, they're probably already going to be disinterested. And so that's been a hard thing to get past with Gentoo Rescue, especially someone that hasn't made a game before, has no background in game design, no one knows who I am. And then just on top of the fact that puzzle's a hard genre, and people can play a ton of really, really good puzzle games for free on itch. It's been hard to sort of market this game that I've spent, 2 years and thousands of hours on. And, it's like a really long game with 40 plus hours with, 300 plus puzzles. All of these things have sort of built up to make the game pretty hard to promote. And it all stemmed from the fact that I didn't consider marketing when I first started the game, which is something that most solo developers run into this issue, and something that, of course, I'll be very, very aware of on my second game, which, as you mentioned, thankfully, I won't have to worry as much about marketing. Assuming Gentoo Rescue is received very well, then players will know that I'll have some notoriety, I guess. Not the right word, but for any future puzzle games.
Maybe I have to change the way I ask. So, what's the hardest part of development, including marketing, not mentioning after the fact? I'm running out of questions, and I would like your opinion I think you've already said, maybe it's reiterative, but you can expand or summarize as much as you want. How do you see the market of puzzle games? Let me reword this question, because I think you already answered. I'll make it a different way. You said you expect a certain rejection from the puzzle gaming community because there are so many, or it might not feel like unique, or they already played something equal, like they already played many games like Gentoo Rescue. Have you gotten a feeling or a perception from the community like that's going to be the case?
Oh no, I mean, when I first started the game, I was gonna like this game. I was gonna promote this game. Everyone was gonna love it. I was gonna be a millionaire after the game releases. Like, there's all these just crazy thoughts that go in your head when you start when I started the game, because I had no idea about anything. I didn't realize really how common sliding puzzle games were, especially single agent sliding puzzle games, which is really the biggest culprit that I'm going to complain about. Because once you add multiple agents, then things start to get more interesting. It's no longer a maze. But the puzzle design itself is still so challenging because sliding puzzles can be very open. You can basically just throw spaghetti at the wall and you have a puzzle that's technically a puzzle that's solvable. And it might be difficult, but it's probably not a good puzzle because you didn't really think about things. So it's just like a very low barrier to entry, I guess. 'Cause it's really easy to make puzzles that work, but not necessarily puzzles that are good. And so, yeah, I mean, I didn't have any of these thoughts going into it. I was just like, oh, I want to make a game, right? So like, I had no background in any of this marketing business, and I didn't really have my finger on the pulse of like even the puzzle game market. Like I was just some guy that really loved Baba Is You and really loved Ricochet robots and kind of wanted to combine those into a game. Yeah, I've learned a lot about a lot of things.
I would say enjoy the feeling, because that's the only moment where you are going to have that, oh, I'll just make a game. Now, from now on, you won't have that feeling. Just enjoy while it lasts.
Yeah. Another big challenge, just to keep adding on things. What's the hardest thing? We've already listed like 2 or 3 of my hardest things. Another hardest thing that's just sort of all encompassing is just being persistent. A lot of people start games, not a lot of people finish games. And it's kind of obvious why it's so hard to do everything. And you could spend 2 years and you're like 80% way done, but you're not even halfway done, right? It's like the last 5% of the game is half the work, sort of situation. And so being persistent's a really big challenge.
I have one more, but I'll leave it for last. I'll take the time to ask the chat questions. I only noticed one is Robert Morris asking about the difficulty. I think it's been answered, but we can say it again. You said the game is on the hardest. Robert's asking if in general the game is easy or hard. You said it leans towards the hard.
It does lean hard, but I've tried the impossible task of like designing for everybody, like not having a very strict target audience, and it's part of why I have these cute and attractive penguins or something. Like I want everyone to be able to enjoy the game. But yeah, the game does lean a little bit hard. The required content is definitely a notch easier. I would say definitely, like if we're like judging against other puzzle games, it's harder than Patrick's Parabox, which I know is people sort of describe as like the baseline for a thinky puzzle game. But it's definitely under a lot of other it's definitely under, like notably under hard puzzle games like Baba Is You, Being in Nothingness, Steven Sausage Roll, The Golem, like all these sorts of games. And a key point there is that like I've tried to keep things all very small and easy to parse. And so even if you struggle with a puzzle, it's not going to be one of those giant puzzles that you struggle with forever. Eventually you could conceivably brute force puzzles. Now again, if you brute force a puzzle, it's a big stain on my record as a puzzle designer. You're not supposed to do that. But the puzzles are all small enough where like you feasibly could. Whereas something in Steven Sausage Roll, if you don't come up with the exact right idea, then you could be stuck for hours. And so I think like the ceiling for the difficulty is quite a bit lower than other hard games, but the baseline is pretty high. Like I've tried to design a challenge into every puzzle. Even if the challenge is small, it should still be there. There's not going to be a puzzle where I mean, except for the very first puzzle. There's not going to be a puzzle where you just think of an idea and that works right away. Think of an idea in 1 second and that's what works. Ideally, the initial thought you have is going to be wrong in some way, and then you have to fix it.
I think it's good that you have your own sense of difficulty of your own game, because from next week, I think you're going to find players of all the spectrum. Those who tear your game apart and say this was nothing, it was a breeze from the Antarctic, very cold, and those who maybe don't go beyond the second world, something. If it's divided into worlds, you're going to find a bit of everything, but it's good that you have your own sense. And Chapura is asking, what was the part you enjoyed the most about creating the game? So we've talked about the hardest, but what did you enjoy the most?
Well, so enjoying the process and enjoying the result are two different things. So I'll answer both. So what parts did I enjoy the most in creating the process? And that was definitely like the programming, probably. Like programming the movement logic, programming the solver, all of these like tools that I've programmed to make the game work. That's sort of what my background is in. So that's the things that went more smoothly. So obviously that's something that I enjoyed more, the process of. But then as far as the results, I've gotten most satisfaction out of the puzzle design. Like when I make a good puzzle, like no feeling beats that. Especially if I take a puzzle that this puzzle has some issues, right? Like I'm trying to write hints for this puzzle. I can't do it. There's no clear deduction to go from, step A to step C. B is missing. Well, I have to rework this puzzle or I have to remove it. And I go and start trying to rework it, and I come up with an idea that works and super elegant, and it's like, oh, this is perfect. That's like the highlight of the game development for me. Although now that I'm answering that, I actually have another answer I want to say, and that's when I learned something about my own game that I didn't intend. This has happened probably 4 or 5 times where I programmed some mechanics, I make puzzles on it, everything's good, and then later on I'm making a puzzle maybe completely unrelated to this mechanic, and then I just stumble on something that I didn't know was possible. Sometimes this actually came up with the system I mentioned earlier with the puzzle generator to find bugs. Sometimes it would find some bugs, and they wouldn't actually be bugs, they were just things that I didn't think was possible. And so those have been the most satisfying, is when the game teaches me something about the game that I built, and it's like I it's like it's some living entity that's like, hey, you can do this. It's like, oh, I didn't know that.
The game is teaching you through a tool that you already made. It's like you are teaching yourself. You're like an AI. You're training yourself.
That's been the most satisfying parts, but really all of it. Like anytime I accomplish something in the game development, it's always been satisfying. Like the music, even if I'm not 100% in love with the music I've created, it's sort of past a certain baseline, and it's like a task done, right? So I'm accomplished with that. The visuals, I'm really happy with the way the visuals are today. Looking back on how it looked a year ago, it's just seeing that progress is very satisfying.
I have one from me personally. One more question. That's all that I saw on the chat, and it's an obvious question. What's beyond Gentoo Rescue after these updates that you mentioned? After that,
so
keep making games, and
I will
probably hopefully puzzle games.
I can say some things actually. I have some things to ramble about. I'll try to keep it not too long. But yeah, the very first thing, as you already mentioned, is the roadmap of getting the puzzle editor more polished to use and to share puzzles. Like you can technically, like the functionality is there now, but if someone upgraded a puzzle pack that has 100 puzzles in it, they would have to send you the file, and you have to put it in the right place, and you have to go and load it in the puzzle editor and then run the test, and then you wouldn't have saving, right? So that this isn't really great. So that's the main priority, and I don't think it'll take a terrible amount of time. That's probably a month or 2 post-release that'll be done. And then after that, of course, any bug fixes or puzzle design fixes that are just terrible. Once I close the door on Gentoo Rescue, I have some ideas for some puzzle games. I have some ideas for some non-puzzle games. I will say that I really much want to work on a 3D game, like an actual 3D game, not a top-down 3D game. But I don't know if that'll go anywhere. That's just probably going to be the first thing I do. Open an engine, play around with some 3D stuff. That could be a 3D puzzle game. That could just be an FPS. And I am going to not make the same mistake this time and just diving into a project and making a game that I want to play, as much as just experimenting with the engine, trying to get a good idea, trying to get an idea that's going to be marketable, something that I can really build off of. And I will say I'm not super eager to immediately jump into another full project right away, because this game has taken me 2 years. Like, I've been working full time and then doing this game on the side, which has basically meant that I've been doing 12 to 16-hour days for like 2.5 years now. Early days it was super insane. Like, I was getting up 2 or 3 hours before work. I'd work on the game and then do my work, and then after work I'd basically work until it was time to go to sleep. Very unhealthy. I've definitely gained like 30 pounds since I started working on this game. So my main priority once I'm done with Gentoo Rescue will just be to get my health back in shape, and to take it a little bit easier. And the ideas will be spinning in the meantime, and I'll try to achieve that lifestyle balance a little bit better once I can finally just move this giant project off of my plate.
So you already have started, because having ideas and thinking about it, about what's next, and balancing those ideas and thinking just by the act of thinking, you already have started. Same way as marketing, it doesn't come at the end. It's part of it. Brainstorming and thinking about it is part of the development. So you have already started.
Also, to that end of future projects, Gentoo Rescue, T2 is spelled T-O-O. It could always be spelled T-W-O, right? So that's always an option as well. I mean, if this game blows up, I would love to work on a sequel.
Gentoo. You mean?
Yeah, Gentoo 2.
Gentoo 2 to the rescue.
But yeah, I mean, my options are open. I will try not to make the same mistake of just diving headfirst into a new project. So I'll definitely be a lot more careful, a lot more choosy about what I want to make. Not just choosy based on what I think will be a good game, but also choosy on what I think will be a marketable game.
Okay, so I don't have any more questions. I have questions, but they don't come from me and they don't come from the chat, because this is the very last question. It's the special, or also aka called the guest question. My previous guests, which were Miriam and Lage from BergBerg Games, they left behind a question for my future next guest, which is you. And at the same time, I will ask you the same, that you leave behind a question for my future guest. First, the question from Miriam and Lage is this. Put in yourself into the situation. You are making a game with a unique selling point. It's nothing like other games. And during the development, another game with that same mechanic or idea comes out. What would you do?
So this could be good. Like, this sounds like a disaster, and the first thing I would think about, just like a mental health thing, right? Because this is a big, you'd be shell shocked, is to realize that that's not always a bad thing. If you have this game that comes out before you that can really test the market, you can see what things are received well. You can already get a big group of players interested in this game, this new genre, and now you're the second game in this genre. That could be a good opportunity, and you can improve on what they did, probably, hopefully, right? you could see things that went well, things that didn't, and ways you can take certain ideas further or take a different direction. That's kind of the mindset I would take with me, and then the rest would be in the details. I mean, it would depend on exactly the situation of, like, what their game is versus my game. If it's like a carbon copy, like it's an identical game, then you could always just release it a week later. Right? I don't know.
They only mentioned, like, or the way I understood, like, mechanic or the way the game works, not how it looks or sound, or maybe if the mechanic is so unique, it will be very prominent. Like, if you are the return of the Obra Dinn and there's nothing like it before, and then you make, I don't know, another game that's similar, that would be an opportunity because there's no market. But at the same time, I've seen these so-called second games being brought to hell by the community because you are a copy of my favorite game. What are you doing? You are copying it, and you are taking the easy road, which it was never intended, as I understand by the question, because you already started the development before it was released. I have.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that would just come up. Like, if you have this game that's similar, players are going to say what players are going to say. Now, if you have a couple thousand people complaining about this game being a copy of another game, well, that's 1,000 people that are interested in the game, right? So that's not always a bad thing. I would I would love to have a lot of people complaining about Gentoo Rescue because that just means there's a lot of people that are like interested at least enough in the game to write a comment. And then just going back to what I already said, like a game needs a hook, like you need something to get people interested in the game, but it also needs an anchor, which is like something that tells the players that like, you're gonna like this game. Your anchor could be, as you mentioned earlier, like Jonathan Blow. I liked Braid. I'm probably gonna like The Witness because I like Jonathan Blow games. That's a type of anchor. And so if someone likes a new game that just came out that's pretty similar to your game, that's a great anchor that you can, use for promotion, that you can use to grab an audience. Although now the hook is maybe less important because now it's not as novel. At least you have a base of players that exists.
So now I'll ask you the same thing they did. You ask my future guest. It can be anything. You can ask whatever related to anything. It's preferable that it's related to video games because puzzle video games, but I'll allow you some room to breathe, and let's say video games. And while you think about the question, I'll give you a few minutes. I'll share with the audience your social link or links. In this case, I'm sharing with the audience your Blue Sky. If they want to find you, you'll be there sharing, as I said, sharing your work. And so, Jagriff, your time to shine.
First, I have a question for you. What can I assume about this next interviewee? Will they be I'm assuming they're a game developer at least. Will they be a puzzle game developer?
They will be a puzzle video game developer, yes. Because my mission is to bring puzzle games to a wider audience. So I can't assure you 100%, but that will be my intention. For now, if you are the third, all three were puzzle game developers, not just video game developer. So yes.
Okay, I mean, I guess I don't know why I asked that. I actually already had the question in mind, and it applies to either. So this is a question that I've kind of alluded to a little bit, and I'm struggling with now, which is, let's say you release a game that, okay, let's say you have a dream game that you want to make, but then you also make another game that you really want to make, and that first game that you really want to make comes out, is wildly successful. Do you put off working on your dream game to work on another game that's closer to that first game that was already successful? Since you've already built up an audience, conceivably you would be better served for continuing to cater to that audience since they already exist. So marketing is not a concern. Or would you risk, working on a completely different type of game that your audience might not care about, but is something that you would want to do, for your own maybe interest as a developer, interest as a gamer, whatever. How do you juggle that sort of situation?
Are you implying that there's another Serious Sam game? Since I mentioned Croteam, because it looks like kind of like the same. I was thinking, you are asking this, making the question. I feel familiar with this situation. This has happened before. And I'm starting thinking, probably more often than only with Croteam. But it was the first one that came to my mind, and I mentioned before in the live stream. Well, it's been noted, and I'll ask future guest.
I see Noru's answer already.
If I'm medium successful, actually Noru was my first guest. I'll work. You can't answer. You are not the guest.
Oh, you asked if I was implying something about that. I guess the implication would be that Gentoo Rescue is going to become wildly successful. Otherwise, this question's irrelevant.
You never know. You never know. In my opinion, I don't think you will have trouble. But maybe not on the millions of units sold. Actually, one interesting question would be, what would you consider a success? At which point you are happy enough, like to say, oh, I didn't expect this. It wasn't on my notes. It's unexpected.
That's a good question. I can maybe say something actually. I thought about this a lot. Like when I first started game development, of course I had the dreams in the millions, but that's not going to happen. But I actually like gave myself some bars. I was like, okay, 10,000 profit. So after Steam cuts in the first, I mean, I actually didn't really do this carefully enough. I didn't even put a timeline on it, but let's say like 10,000. In the first year, I would consider the game successful, which I mean, again, this is a puzzle game, right? So that would not be successful for any other title. But I think for for a 2D puzzle game, grid-based puzzle game that doesn't have like a hook as amazing as Baba Is You or anything like that, that's kind of where I set the bar. At least that's where I set the bar like a year and a half ago, before anyone even knew about Gentoo Rescue. Actually, before there were even penguins. And I was something like below 1,000, it's a failure. Above 1,000 is a success. Anything in between, I don't know. But of course, if the game comes out and it makes $10,000, then I'm kind of working on like super sub minimum wage for the last 2 years. So even that wouldn't really be that successful. But you know, it's a hobby, so it's whatever.
It's something relative. So it's each one can have differences. So it's interesting that you give us your opinion. I'm at the point of deepest sadness because that's the end of the interview. We went way off the time that I was thinking of, but I felt it was all interesting and very insightful, and I thank you for sharing all this information, all your opinion, and opening the development of Gentoo Rescue to everyone, not just to me but to everyone, because this is live, it's for everyone. And I learned a few things as well. Gentoo Rescue releases in 2 days or 1.5 by now, so it's 22nd in the US and Europe. Asia is the 23rd. Actually, one question, because I don't know, you have to press a button, right? Even though it says it releases in 8 hours. If those 8 hours go by and you don't press the button, it's not available. Or how does it work? That's behind the scenes of Steam.
I've never done this, so I don't know if this is 100% correct, but I'm pretty sure I have to hit a button. So I'm setting a few alarms Thursday morning.
I've seen people talking about it, and that's the picture, the image that I visualized, but I made it up myself because I don't know. In any case, I mean, maximum 2 days it will be available, and it releases on Steam, right? Only on Steam?
Yep.
Only available.
It'll be on Steam for Windows and Linux. I do plan to put it on itch eventually, but it probably won't happen on release date. So if you really don't want to play on Steam and you want like no DRM binary of the game, you can wait. Maybe, I mean, I don't know how long it'll take. Maybe a month. It's just a build, but there's a lot of other pressing issues. So yeah, if anyone really wants an itch version sooner, feel free to just contact me and maybe I'll make it a higher priority. But yeah, eventually it'll be on itch.
Or they can buy the game twice, maybe. First on Steam, and then when it releases,
oh yeah,
it's higher. We wouldn't.
I mean, you really have to buy it 10 times.
Really, very last question for you is: would you like to add anything else, also known as last famous words?
I mean, not particularly. You've been very thorough. This has been a great interview. I did not realize it's as late as it is. I do need to get going at some point. But yeah, this has been really fun. You've covered everything, and you said you learned a lot. I learned a lot. Sometimes you ask questions, and I just start talking without really thinking them through, and I get some insight into basically what based on what I say. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I like it. This is the end of this interview, this live stream, but the doors of the channel are open for you. Now you are like in a hall of fame for this channel, and whenever you want to come and annoy me, you can come anytime. Thank you so much for your time, and hope to see you around soon.
Yep, I'll be around. And then just as famous last words, I guess. I just thought of something. You linked Blue Sky. I also, if people go to the Steam link, they can find a link to our Discord server. I'm the sole developer. It's my Discord server. You can go there and just hang out and feel free to ask questions. And I mean, my DMs are open for anyone that wants to chat about anything. Just don't be a bot. Don't message me bot messages that I get on Discord every day. That's really annoying. As long as you just are a genuine human, you are welcome to hang out in the Discord and chat it up with me.
Thank you so much, and all the best.
Thank you.
We'll be coming here for a second because now we say goodbye to Jagriff. Jagriff, I say Jagriff. It's more like the way I see it. Nothing else. I've enjoyed the time doing this interview. Very insightful, as I enjoy every interview. Thank you all in the chat, Robert, Noru, and Shapura. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone watching. any point during the live stream, either on YouTube or on Twitch. If you liked what you saw, first, more important, the game, wishlist Gentoo Rescue. And if you enjoyed the interview, consider subscribing and following either YouTube or Twitch. Nothing else from me today. I hope to see you all next time. Until then, don't be puzzled. Bye now.